He was summoned as a hero. They tested his abilities and turned pale. Class undetermined. Magical potential 0. And now this 0 is about to take down a demon feared by an entire kingdom. But first, Arthur comes to his senses. The cold of the marble presses against his back. It smells of blood and burnt stone. He opens his eyes and sees the cathedral ceiling. Not a hospital, not a morgue. Stained glass windows with winged warriors, black columns. Runes on the floor pulsate around his body like the heart of a dying man. He lies in a glowing circle and thinks with surprising calm. Either a coma and a medieval in a dream, or he has died and ended up in the strangest afterlife in history. A girl leans over him, pale to the point of blueness, a crown with a broken prong, dried blood on her temple. Eyes the color of a winter sky pierce him with such hope that it makes him uneasy. She speaks. The language is foreign, but the words fall into his head like stones into water. A hero from another world. You have come to save us. Arthur sits down. His body obeys, but something inside has changed. A second pulse beats in his chest, hot, heavy. Behind the girl stand people, knights in battered armor, an old man with a staff, a priestess, soldiers. Everyone is waiting. And outside the walls, there is a rumbling, not thunder. The former captain of the reconnaissance battalion knows the sound of a shockwave all too well. Someone is pounding the city. Magical artillery fire. That means the enemy is close. Arthur stands up. His knees hold him. His mind is working. He assesses the situation in seconds. Cold weapons, swords, spears, shields. Not a single gun barrel. People are wounded and terrified. The girl in the crown is the leader, and she's at her limit. He's no hero. He's an engineer, and he has solutions that no one here has even considered. The girl's name is Valderin, the last of the dynasty. 20 years ago, an army of demons led by a creature named Bel'gazoth came from the rift in the north. 3 empires fell. The 5 chosen heroes died one after another. Valderin is the last survivor. An old man in a robe steps forward. The court mage Theodorus looks on with suspicion. He asks what class the hero is, what magic, what rank. And this is where the strangest part begins. A translucent panel flashes in Arthur's mind. The system has identified the host. Class undetermined, magic potential 0, unique ability, arsenal. He mentally reaches for the word, and the panel unfolds like a weapons catalog. Every record of weapons from the 19th to the 21st century, every blueprint, every caliber, every grade of steel. Materialization via mana. Visualize the item down to the last screw. Provide enough mana, and the system will assemble it from the ether. A pistol takes a day of meditation. A machine gun takes a week and 3 mages. A tank takes a month and an entire monastery. Arthur closes the panel. He looks at the mage. He looks at the princess. He looks at the soldiers standing like a wall between him and the door behind which someone is being killed. He says there's no class, no magic, but there is something. He needs someone else's mana. And 5 minutes of silence. Theodorus frowns. He asks why. Arthur replies that he intends to solve the problem behind the door. And behind the door, says the mage, is an A-rank demon scout, the one who single-handedly slaughtered the garrison of Mirhold Fortress. 200 soldiers in one night. An 8th circle mage wouldn't last a minute against him. Arthur nods. He says 1 shot will be enough. The silence in the hall becomes palpable. The princess looks at him. 3 seconds. 5. Then she reaches out her hand. Her palm flashes white. Mana flows into him like warm water. A second pulse races in his chest. Arthur closes his eyes. A blueprint unfolds in his mind. A Dragunov sniper rifle. SVD, 7.62 by 54 caliber, 620mm barrel, PSO-1 scope, 10-round magazine. He knows it like the back of his hand. He's taken it apart and put it back together on camera. He's handled it at the firing range. Mana burns in his chest and transforms knowledge into matter. The air before his palms trembles. It flickers. It thickens. The knights recoil. The mage raises his shield. The princess doesn't move. 4 minutes. And the rifle lands in Arthur's hands. Black, cold, real. He pulls the trigger. A short metallic clang. No one in this world has ever heard anything like it. He approaches the stained glass window. A shadow moves across the square. Huge, bipedal, claws as long as a forearm, skin like obsidian, yellow eyes. The bodies of knights lie all around. The demon is playing with the last survivor, tossing him up and catching him like a cat with a mouse. Arthur smashes the glass with the butt of his rifle. Cold air hits his face, the butt, his cheek, the sight, his breath. 600 meters. The wind is light. The demon isn't even looking his way. Why bother? Arrows bounce off. Swords break. 7th circle magic leaves only scratches. Arthur exhales halfway. His finger rests on the trigger. 1 shot. A roar splits the silence like lightning. The knights crouch. The mage raises his staff. The demon freezes in the square. The bullet enters the left eye socket at a speed of 830 meters per second. It exits the back of the head along with a chunk of skull. The creature that slaughtered 200 soldiers in a single night collapses like a felled tree. Face down, into a pool of its own black blood. Dead before it even touched the ground. The hall is silent. Everyone is looking at him. And in the princess's eyes, the color of a winter sky, there are tears. Not from fear, from hope. For the first time in 20 years, Arthur lowers his rifle. He turns to the hall. He looks at everyone, and he speaks calmly. It was a demonstration. You have a problem, he has a solution. It's time to talk about the budget. Arthur spent the next 3 hours in the War Council, if you could call it a council. A long table made of dark oak, a map of the continent on the wall, tin figures representing the troops, just like at headquarters. Only the staff officers looked at him as if he were a walking miracle, and half of them still didn't understand what had happened in the square. Princess Leia sat at the head of the table. Arthur noticed how she held her back, straight, rigid, every movement controlled. 22 years old, yet her eyes were like those of a 40-year-old general after 3 wars. She had buried her father at 19, 2 brothers at 20, her last fiancé at 21. Arthur knew that look. He'd seen it in the mirror after his second mission. The mage Theodorus unfolded the map. Valderin occupied the southern quarter of the continent. The north belonged to the demons. The west and east were formally neutral, but the 3 kingdoms there had neither armies nor the will to wage war. The Gnome Mountains in the southwest were impassable. The elven forests in the east were impassable. Everyone sat behind their walls and waited for the demons to reach them. Arthur asked about their numbers. Valderin's regular army numbered 12,000. Of those, about 8,000 were combat-ready. The rest were wounded or untrained militia. There were 400 knights of the Order of Light. There were about 100 mages of various circles. Opposing them at Bel'gazoth, by the most conservative estimates, were 200,000 demons of various ranks, from minor goblins to 4 S-rank generals. The ratio was 1 to 25. Arthur looked at the map and mentally superimposed a grid over it. Terrain, roads, rivers, passes, bridges. His brain did this automatically. Years in the reconnaissance battalion. Years at the channel where he analyzed operations from Stalingrad to Fallujah. The problem wasn't the number of demons. The problem was the doctrine. Valderin fought with heroes. A single strong knight or mage would step forward and decide the battle with personal might. When the hero fell, the army crumbled. The entire military philosophy of this world was built on a single principle. Find the strongest, put him in front, pray he survives. Arthur said this needed to change, completely, from scratch. He wasn't going to put a single person in front. He was going to give a weapon to every soldier in the ranks. A weapon that didn't require mana, didn't require 10 years of training at a magic academy, didn't require talent. All it took was 2 working hands and 2 working eyes. Theodorus asked what kind of weapon it was. Arthur placed an SVD on the table. He said this was just the beginning, but he needed mana, a lot of mana, and materials, Steel, copper, lead, saltpeter, sulfur, coal. The princess asked how many of these devices he could make. Arthur answered honestly. A single unit like this rifle costs him a full day of concentration and the mana reserves of a single, powerful mage. That's too slow. He needs a different approach. He can create the first samples, prototypes, and then local craftsmen must learn to make them themselves, from ordinary materials, without mana, from steel and wood and gunpowder. The last word hung in the air. Theodorus asked again. Gunpowder. Arthur nodded. A mixture of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal. When ignited, it creates an instant expansion of gases that propels the projectile down the barrel at tremendous speed. He drew a diagram right on the map with chalk. Barrel, chamber, charge, bullet. The simplest principle. The mage paled. Not from fear, from understanding. If this is true, then this weapon requires no mana at all. Any peasant with such a barrel is more dangerous than a knight in enchanted armor. Arthur confirmed it. That is the point. The Grand Master of the Order of Light rose from behind the table. Cardinal Aurelius Vandermeer, tall, gray-haired, a face carved from bone, eyes like two shards of ice. He had been silent throughout the council and now spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, and every word fell like a stone. He said that the chosen hero proposed replacing blessed steel with filthy gunpowder, to insult the gods who bestowed mana upon mankind, to place murder in the hands of the rabble. This is not salvation. This is heresy. Arthur looked at the cardinal, calmly, without defiance. He replied that the demons beyond the walls had destroyed 3 empires and slain 5 heroes. The gods have been silent for 20 years. If heresy is what will save the children in this city, then he is a heretic and proud of it. The cardinal gripped his staff so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He turned and left. 4 knights of the order followed him out. The princess watched him go. Arthur noticed a twitch in the muscle of her cheek. It wasn't anger, it was fear. The cardinal commanded 400 knights, 400 fighters out of 8,000. To lose them now meant losing a fifth of the army. Arthur told the princess he would deal with the cardinal later. First, he needed weapons. She nodded. She assigned him 10 of her best soldiers. She granted him access to the royal forge. And she ordered the mage Theodorus to assist with mana. Theodorus didn't look happy, but he obeyed. Arthur spent the night in the forge. Theodorus's mana flowed into him in a thin, steady stream. 2 apprentices stood nearby with their mouths agape. Arthur closed his eyes and began to design. Not an SVD this time. Something simpler, more reliable. Something that could be given to a man who had never held anything more complex than a sword. A Kalashnikov assault rifle. A K-74. 5.45 by 39 millimeters caliber. Simple design, high reliability. Works in mud, sand, and swamps. Can be disassembled and reassembled in a minute. The perfect weapon for an army learning to fight all over again. The materialization was slower than with the SVD. Theodorus's mana was foreign, and the system resisted it. The first rifle appeared 4 hours later, the second 3 hours after that. By dawn, Arthur was holding 10 rifles in his hands, 10 magazines, 3,000 rounds. His head was splitting, his hands were shaking. Theodorus sat on the floor, as gray as ashes, but the weapons lay on the workbench, real, functional, ready to kill. In the morning, Arthur led 10 soldiers out to the fortress's backyard. The first lesson, how to hold it, how to load it, how to disengage the safety, how to aim, how to breathe, how to press the trigger, not jerk it. The soldiers were professionals. Their bodies were trained. Their hands were accustomed to the weight of a weapon, even if it was a different one. But the first shot from an automatic rifle was a shock to everyone. The roar, the recoil, the smell of gunpowder, a fist-sized hole in the wooden target. The squad leader, a young lieutenant named Reinhard, his eyes wide, his hands still feeling the recoil. He looked at the target, he looked at the rifle, he looked at Arthur, and said that if 10 men with such weapons stood on the wall, the demons wouldn't get through a single gate. Arthur shook his head, said that 10 wasn't enough. He needed 100, then 1,000, then 10,000. And not with these automatic rifles he'd assembled from mana. He needed factories, forges, craftsmen who would learn to make barrels, bolts, and cartridges by hand. Without magic, Reinhard asked where to find so many craftsmen. Arthur replied that he knew where. In the Dwarf Mountains. The journey to the Dwarven Mountains took 4 days on horseback. The princess gave Arthur a detachment of 20 horsemen, Reinhard with 5 archers, the mage Theodorus for mana support, and an escort whom Arthur hadn't asked for. Sister Madeline Cross, 25 years old, a priestess and combat medic of the Church of Light. Dark hair tied in a bun, a gentle gaze, a soft voice. Beneath her cassock, the physique of a professional warrior. The princess introduced her as the squad's medic. Arthur looked at Madeline. Madeline looked at Arthur. They both understood everything. The cardinal had sent a spy. The princess knew this and allowed it because refusing the church a priestess healer would mean declaring open conflict. Arthur decided to play it out in the open. On the first evening by the campfire, he called Madeline over and spoke plainly. He knew she was here on the cardinal's orders. He wouldn't hide anything. Let her report whatever she wanted. He had no secrets he was ashamed of. Madeline didn't deny it. She just asked why he was telling her this. Arthur replied that he needed a good medic, not a lousy spy. And if she saw his work from the inside, she might change her mind about the cardinal. On the second day of their journey, they were attacked. A demonic patrol. 12 goblin scouts and 1 C-rank squad leader. The goblins emerged from the forest silently. The knights' horses whinnied. The swordsmen reached for their weapons. Arthur raised his hand. He gave the order. Reinhard, 5 marksmen, fire line, 3 seconds to get ready. Distribute targets from left to right. Fire. 5 automatic rifles fired simultaneously, short bursts of 3 rounds each. The goblins weren't wearing enchanted armor. Their skin was tough like leather, but not like steel. The bullets went right through them. 12 bodies fell in 6 seconds. The rank C squad leader proved tougher. The first burst hit him in the chest, and he staggered, but didn't fall. Skin like stone. Magical tissue reinforcement. Arthur noted this mentally. Rank C and above means enhanced physical defense. I need a larger caliber or a precise hit to a vulnerable area. Reinhard didn't wait for the command. He switched the assault rifle to single-shot mode. He took aim. 2 shots to the head. The corporal fell. The entire fight lasted 14 seconds. The knights who hadn't yet drawn their swords stood in their saddles and watched. Madeline watched too. Not at the corpses, at the faces of the shooters. The 5 soldiers who had held an automatic rifle in their hands for the first time, just 3 days ago, had calm, focused expressions. Like craftsmen who had finished their work. Not like heroes who had performed a feat. That was important. Arthur wasn't building heroes. He was building a system. On the 3rd day, the mountains came into view. A gray wall stretching from horizon to horizon. The entrance to the Gnome Kingdom was guarded by 2 sentries in heavy armor wielding axes as tall as a man. They didn't let strangers through. Gnome law. The mountains have been closed since the invasion began. 20 years of complete isolation. Arthur asked if he could speak with one of the masters. The guards replied that he could not. Arthur pulled an SVD from behind his back. He didn't aim it. He simply laid it on the ground in front of the guards. He said he'd brought a gift for the head blacksmith, something they'd never seen before. If the master looked at it and said it wasn't interesting, Arthur would leave. The guards exchanged glances. One went inside. An hour later, he returned with a gnome. Short, broad-shouldered, a braid down to her waist. Her hands were covered in calluses and burns. Brunhilde Eisenberg, a 5th-generation master gunsmith. She picked up the rifle, turned it over in her hands. Her eyes narrowed, her fingers ran along the barrel, over the bolt carrier, over the trigger mechanism. She asked what it was. Arthur replied, "A weapon that kills a rank A demon with a single shot from a distance of 600 paces." Hilda looked at him, then back at the rifle. She asked if she could take it apart. Arthur nodded. Hilda took the SVD apart in 3 minutes, without instructions, just by the logic of its design. She examined every part, turned it over in her hands. She sniffed it. She tested it with her teeth. Then she put it back together. Not a single extra part, not a single mistake. Arthur watched and, for the first time in 4 days, felt something resembling relief. This woman was a genius. Hilda said the barrel was interesting, rifling inside the bore. Spiral, to stabilize the projectile in flight. She asked who had come up with it. Arthur replied that it was the people in his world, a long time ago, and that he had blueprints, hundreds of blueprints, thousands. But he needed a workshop. He needed blacksmiths. He needed someone who could turn the blueprints into mass production. Hilda was silent for 10 seconds. Then she asked one thing. Could this weapon kill a demon general? Arthur replied that it couldn't. For a general, something bigger is needed. And if Hilda agrees to help, in 6 months she'll see things her great-grandfather never even dreamed of. Hilda smiled. The first smile Arthur had seen in this world in 4 days. She said she had a condition. She didn't want to be an assistant. She wanted to be a partner. Her name on every barrel, her workshop, her blacksmiths. Arthur held out his hand. Partnership. Thus was born the manufacturing consortium that would later go down in history as Eisenberg Arsenal. The first week in the mountains was hell. Arthur drew up the blueprints. Hilda brought them to life. The problem was the materials. Dwarven steel was excellent, but different. Different composition, different impurities, different properties. A barrel that was supposed to withstand 3,000 atmospheres of pressure cracked after 200 shots. The bolt jammed. Springs broke. Arthur redrew the blueprints. He adapted them, changed the tolerances, changed the steel grades. Hilda stood nearby. She watched. She asked questions. She argued. She had an intuitive understanding of metal. Arthur told her what properties were needed, and Hilda found the alloy. Sometimes on the 3rd try, sometimes on the 10th, but she found it. On the 3rd day, Arthur assembled a team of 20 dwarf blacksmiths. He showed them what assembly line production was. Each person makes 1 part. Not the whole product, 1 part, 100 times, 1,000 times, until their hands memorized the movement. The dwarves grumbled. For them, weapons were art. Every blade is unique. Every axe is signed with the master's name. And this outsider wants them to churn out identical iron tubes. Hilda dealt with the grumbling herself. She placed the finished barrel on the table. She loaded a cartridge. She fired at the cave wall. The bullet sank into the stone a hand's length deep. The gnomes fell silent. Then the head smith asked if he could try. Within a week, 20 gnomes were producing 3 barrels a day. At the same time, Arthur was solving the gunpowder problem. Nitrate existed in this world. Alchemists used it for fertilizers and medicines. Sulfur, too. Coal, of course. Arthur knew the proportions by heart. 75 parts nitrate, 15 parts coal, 10 parts sulfur. Granulation. Drying. The first batch of gunpowder turned out dirty. It burned unevenly. It produced too much soot. Madeline, who had been silently watching all this time, approached Arthur that evening. She asked why he was doing this. Not the weapons, but exactly this. Teaching the gnomes, sharing his knowledge, giving away the blueprints. Anyone else in his place would have kept a monopoly, would have become indispensable. Arthur replied that irreplaceable people are the greatest weakness of any army. If he were killed tomorrow, everything he knows would die with him. But if he taught Hilda and the dwarves and the soldiers and the engineers, his death would change nothing. The war would continue without him. Madeline was silent for a long time. Then she said that the cardinal considered him dangerous. Arthur nodded. He said the cardinal was right. He was dangerous, but not to people. 2 weeks later, Arthur returned to Valderin with a shipment, 40 assault rifles, assembled not from mana, but from dwarven steel by the hands of dwarven blacksmiths, 10,000 rounds of ammunition, 20 barrels of gunpowder, and Hilda. She had come in person. She said she wanted to see her weapons in action on the battlefield. Princess Leia met them at the gates. Arthur noticed the dark circles under her eyes. 2 weeks without him. The demons attacked twice. The eastern wall held, but casualties were mounting. The men were exhausted. Arthur reported the results. Production has begun. In a month, the dwarves will be producing 50 barrels a week. In 2 months, 100. At the same time, a gunpowder factory needs to be built closer to the capital, so they don't have to transport ammunition over the mountain passes. The princess listened. She nodded. Then she asked quietly, "Would that be enough?" Arthur answered honestly, "No. 50 barrels a week is a drop in the bucket. He needs an industry, metallurgy, chemical production, optics, machine tools. Everything that took 200 years to build on Earth, he had to build in a year." But today there were 40 automatic rifles and 40 men who needed to be trained to shoot. The training took a week. Arthur drove the soldiers from dawn to dusk, shooting, reloading, cleaning weapons, tactics. Don't stand in a cluster, spread out, cover, firing sectors, crossfire. Things that on Earth are covered in the first month of training. Here, no one knew them. Reinhard turned out to be the best student. He picked it up on the fly. 3 days later, he was already commanding a fire team, as if he'd been doing it his whole life. Arthur appointed him sergeant of the 1st Rifle Platoon. Meanwhile, Hilda wasn't sitting idle. She inspected the royal smithy. She was horrified. She called it a barn. She demanded a renovation. Arthur secured funding from the princess. Hilda hired local blacksmiths. Within a week, the smithy had been transformed into a workshop. Forges, anvils, primitive lathes that Arthur had designed from memory. The first tool workshop outside the dwarf mountains. On the 10th day after their return, a messenger arrived. A demonic army. 2,000 goblins, 300 trolls, 12 B-rank demons, advancing toward the Grey Bridge, the only crossing over the Taln River. If the bridge falls, the demons will reach the plain before the capital. The War Council convened within an hour. General Garrett, commander of the army, proposed a standard plan. Knights of the Order of Light in the vanguard, support mages, infantry in defense. Arthur said no. He proposed a different plan. 100 archers in positions before the bridge, sandbags, trenches, firing positions. No knights in the front, no heroic charges. The enemy is advancing toward the bridge. The bridge is narrow. The enemy cannot spread out. A classic choke point. General Garrett looked at him as if he were crazy. 100 men against 2,000. No mages, no knights, just iron tubes. Princess Leia was silent. She looked at the map. Then she asked Arthur directly, "Is he sure?" Arthur replied that he was sure. The general asked to speak. He said that if the archers couldn't hold the bridge, the path to the capital would be open. Arthur replied that that was exactly why he would go with them personally. Dawn over the Grey Bridge was cold. Fog rose from the river. 100 archers took up positions on the south bank, sandbags in 3 rows, makeshift trenches. Arthur stood behind the line with binoculars. Reinhard was beside him. Behind them, on the hill, were observers from headquarters. General Garrett, Princess Leia, the mage Theodorus. Everyone was watching. The demons appeared from the north an hour after dawn. First, dust on the horizon, then noise, pounding, growling. 2,000 goblins marched in column along the road toward the bridge. A mindless mass, brute force. Over 20 years of war, they had grown accustomed to people scattering at the sight of them, to walls falling, to knights dying one after another. Arthur raised his hand. He waited. The goblins stepped onto the bridge. The front ranks were already halfway across. 400 meters, 300, 200. Arthur lowered his hand. Fire. 100 machine guns fired simultaneously. The sound was like a thunderclap, a continuous roar, a wall of lead. The bullets rained down on the dense mass of bodies on the narrow bridge. It was impossible to miss. The goblins in the front ranks didn't understand what had happened. They just fell, one after another, by the dozens. Bodies tumbled off the bridge into the river. Blood flowed over the stones. The rear ranks pressed forward. They couldn't see what was ahead. They trampled over their own dead. They climbed over the corpses, and they fell too. Arthur kept count. 30 seconds. First magazine. Reload. 3 seconds. Second magazine. Fire. Another 30 seconds. The goblins on the bridge lay in piles. The living couldn't get past the dead. A stampede. Panic. The rear ranks finally realized the front ones were gone and tried to turn around. The trolls in the column couldn't turn on the narrow road. They were stuck. They became targets. Arthur gave the order to concentrate fire on the trolls. The trolls were bigger and tougher than the goblins. Thick skin, muscles like ropes. A single 5.45 bullet would enter the body and get stuck. It didn't kill. Arthur noted this mentally. For trolls, a larger caliber is needed. 7.62 at a minimum. But 10 bullets in a single troll did the job. The trolls were falling. Slower than the goblins, but they were falling. The battle lasted 22 minutes. 22 minutes of continuous fire. 100 shooters expended 6,000 rounds. Bodies lay on the bridge and the approaches to it. More than 1,000 goblins, about 200 trolls. The remnants of the column fled north. The B-rank demons did not engage in battle. They stood in the rear and watched. Then they retreated along with the remnants. Arthur lowered his binoculars. He looked at his shooters. 100 men. Not a single scratch. Not a single demon had reached the line of sacks. Enemy casualties exceeded 1,200. Archer casualties, 0. The odds were beyond calculation. On the hill behind him, there was silence. Princess Leia stood motionless. Her hands gripped the reins so tightly, her knuckles turned white. General Garrett sat in the saddle with his mouth agape. Theodorus pressed his palm to his lips. They had seen wars. They had seen battles. They had seen heroes cut down demons with swords and burn them with spells. But they had never seen this. 100 ordinary people, not mages, not knights, not heroes. 100 former peasants and artisans with iron tubes in their hands. They destroyed an army, without a single casualty. The rumor spread across the continent within a week. Merchants, refugees, spies, everyone carried the same story. Weapons of thunder had appeared in Valderin. 100 archers had stopped 2,000 demons at the bridge. The casualty ratio was 1 to infinity. Reactions varied. The gnome clans, who had been holed up in the mountains for 20 years, sent a delegation. They wanted to see the weapons. They wanted blueprints. They wanted contracts. Elven envoys arrived 10 days later. Polite, cautious. They asked questions about ballistics. Arthur noticed that their questions were smarter than anyone else's. They were already thinking about countermeasures. The 3 Western kingdoms sent spies, not ambassadors. Arthur knew. His own counterintelligence was working. Reinhard turned out to be good at more than just shooting. But there was another reaction. Cardinal Vandermeer. The news about the Grey Bridge did not please him. It horrified him. 100 peasants had destroyed an army. Without magic, without a blessing, without heroes. If this was true, then everything he believed in was a lie. Magic was not the supreme power. A knight's honor did not decide wars. The gods were unnecessary. The cardinal began to act. The cardinal struck the first blow 10 days after the Battle of the Grey Bridge. Not with a sword, not with magic, with paper. An official decree from the Church of Light recognizing gunpowder weapons as artifacts against God. Anyone who manufactures, possesses, or uses firearms is excommunicated from the church. Anyone who aids a designated heretic forfeits the right to a funeral service and posthumous blessing. In a world where 90% of the population believed in the afterlife, this was a blow heavier than any army. Arthur learned of the decree that morning. The princess had sent a messenger to the workshop. He entered the throne room. Leah sat on the throne. Her face was pale. Her hands rested on the armrests. General Garrett stood nearby. Theodorus, Reinhard. Everyone was silent. Arthur read the decree. He placed it on the table. He asked how many people had already left. The princess replied. 30 out of 100 archers had returned their weapons that morning. 12 blacksmiths had refused to work in the workshop. 4 villages that supplied saltpeter had stopped their deliveries. The capital's parish priest had called on the townspeople not to help the heretic. Arthur sat down. He rubbed his face with his palms. So that's how it is. He could kill a rank A demon with a single shot. He could stop an army of 2,000 beasts. But he couldn't fight faith. Bullets won't solve this problem. General Garrett suggested arresting the cardinal. Arthur said no. An arrest would turn Vandermeer into a martyr. Half the country would take to the streets. Theodorus suggested appealing to the Holy Conclave to appeal the decree. Arthur asked how long that would take. Theodorus replied that it would take anywhere from 3 months to a year. Arthur said that in 3 months, the demons would assemble a new army, and this time, they wouldn't send goblins, but something far worse. There was no time for ecclesiastical courts. He had to act differently. Arthur thought for 2 days. He didn't leave workshop. Hilda brought him food. Madeline stopped by twice. She said nothing. She stood at the door. She watched him sitting over the drawings he wasn't drawing. On the 3rd day, he called Madeline over. He sat down across from her. He looked her in the eyes. He asked what she believed in. Madeline replied that she believed in the light, in the gods, in life after death. Arthur asked if she believed the gods wanted children to die. Madeline replied, no. Arthur asked if she believed the cardinal was right to ban weapons that could save thousands of lives. Madeline was silent. Arthur didn't press her. He just waited. Then she said quietly, she didn't know. She had come to spy on him and had seen things that didn't fit into the cardinal's worldview. She had seen the gnomes learning to make barrels and laughing with joy when they succeeded. She saw how the soldiers at the Grey Bridge all returned alive, every last one of them, and their wives and children wept with happiness. She saw how Arthur stayed up all night poring over blueprints, not for glory, but so that the next battle would also end without casualties. She doesn't know if the cardinal is right, but she knows that Arthur is not the enemy. Arthur nodded. He said that he needed her help, not as a spy, as a medic. He wanted to show her something. He pulled a kit out of the system's inventory, a field medical kit, bandages, tourniquets, antiseptic, syringes, surgical instruments. Everything materialized from mana, from memory. On Earth, this kit cost next to nothing. Here, it was a treasure. Arthur showed Madeline what antiseptic was, how to disinfect wounds, how to stop bleeding with a tourniquet, how to apply a bandage, how to identify the type of wound. Madeline was a priestess healer. Her magic healed wounds with light, but magic required mana. When her mana ran out, the priestess became useless and the wounded died of blood poisoning. Arthur showed her a world where healing didn't depend on mana, where a clean cloth and alcohol save lives, where knowledge of anatomy is more important than prayer. Madeline sat over the kit until morning. She asked questions. She took notes. She tried things on herself. She cut her finger and treated the wound with antiseptic. She stitched it up, neatly, precise, the hands of a surgeon. Arthur watched her and thought that the cardinal had made a mistake by sending her specifically. At the same time, Arthur was solving a second problem. The people who had left needed to be replaced, but not just by recruiting new ones. He needed people who wouldn't lay down their arms because of a church decree. The answer came from where he least expected it. A caravan of refugees from the eastern provinces arrived at the capital's walls. 300 people, women, old people, children. There were almost no men. The demons had slaughtered the male population to the last man. Arthur went to the caravan, not as a hero, as a human being. He helped set up tents. He distributed food from the supplies. He treated the wounded alongside Madeline, and he listened. The stories were all the same. A village, night, demons, screams, fire, running, the loss of everything. One boy, about 12 years old, had empty eyes. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just sat there, staring at a single point. His mother said the boy had seen a troll kill his father and older brother. He's been silent ever since. Arthur sat down next to the boy. He was silent. For a long time. Then he said quietly that he knew what it was like. To lose people and be unable to do anything. That's the worst part. Not the pain, not the fear, but the helplessness. But helplessness isn't forever. There are ways to become stronger. Not with magic, not with a sword, with knowledge. And if the boy wanted to, Arthur would teach him. The boy didn't answer, but the next day he came to the workshop, and the next, and the next. Arthur gave him simple work, cleaning barrels, counting cartridges, handing tools to Hilda. The boy didn't speak, but he worked silently and precisely. Hilda said he had good hands. Among the refugees were others, teenagers and women who wanted revenge, who had nothing to lose, whom the church decree did not scare because the church had not saved their families. Arthur began to form a second rifle platoon, not from soldiers, from those whom this world considered nobodies. Among the refugees, Arthur found one more person. The caravan had brought a half-breed with it, red-haired, freckled, 19 years old, a scar across her left eyebrow. Her hands were bound in ropes. The caravan guards said they'd caught her near a demonic slave convoy, a half-breed, no family, no name, probably a spy or a thief. Arthur looked at her. She looked at him. Green eyes, cold, the eyes of a person who had already decided to kill everyone in the room if necessary. Arthur ordered them to untie her hands. The guards objected. Arthur repeated the order. They untied her. The girl stood up. She rubbed her wrists. And in that very second, she lunged at Arthur with a knife that no one had seen until that moment. Quick, professional, a low blow to the liver, classic assassin technique. Arthur caught her arm, reflex, recon unit, hand-to-hand combat. He twisted her wrist. The knife fell. The girl hissed in pain. He let go. She jumped back, took a fighting stance, looked at him, waiting for a blow. Arthur asked her name. She didn't answer. He asked how she knew the assassin's techniques. Silence. He asked how old she was when they started training her. Silence. Then, quietly, 8. Arthur nodded. 8 years old. They took the child at 8 and turned her into a weapon. He said his name was Arthur, that he wasn't going to hit her. He wasn't going to tie her down again. He wasn't going to use her. She could leave right now. But if she wanted to stay, he had a job for her. Not a weapons job, a human's job. She called herself Caitlin, Kate, no last name. She said she'd stay for now. Not because she trusted him, because she had nowhere else to go. Arthur accepted that. The next day, he handed her a sniper rifle, not an SVD, a different one, lighter, more compact, tailored to her height and arm length. Kate took the rifle. She turned it over in her hands. She rested it against her shoulder. The stock fit perfectly. She asked why she needed it. Arthur answered, "She isn't a weapon. She is a weapon operator. It's a fundamental difference. A weapon doesn't choose its target. The operator does. A weapon doesn't decide who lives. The operator decides. She is no longer a tool in someone else's hands. She is the one holding the tool." Kate was silent. Then she turned toward the target. She fired. She hit the center from 300 meters, the first shot in her life. Arthur wasn't surprised. Hands that had been trained to kill since the age of 8 know how to hold a weapon. All that was needed was to give her the right weapon. Meanwhile, the cardinal didn't stop. The decree was only the beginning. A week later, rumors reached Arthur. Vandermeer had sent messengers to every parish in the kingdom. Preachers in the town squares spoke of a heretic from another world who wanted to destroy magic and deprive the people of the gods' blessings. Part of the nobility sided with the cardinal. 3 barons withdrew their soldiers from the army. 2 more stopped food supplies to the capital. Arthur convened a council. The situation was worsening. Military victories meant nothing if the home front was falling apart. Princess Leia looked exhausted. She was torn between Arthur and the church. Supporting one meant losing the other. Arthur proposed a plan, not a military one, a political one. He needed the Royal Academy, the place where mages were trained. If he gained access to the lecture halls, he could demonstrate that technology was not the enemy of magic, but its partner, that gunpowder and mana could work together, that he didn't need to destroy the old order, he needed to complement it. The princess hesitated. The academy was mages' territory, traditions, politics, complicated relations with the throne. Theodorus unexpectedly supported the idea. He said that there were people at the academy who thought more broadly than the cardinal, young mages, researchers, those who felt confined by the 7 elements. Arthur nodded. He needed at least one scholar in this world who understood that mana was energy, not a gift from God. Theodorus looked at him strangely. He said that such a person existed, an elf, a researcher. She worked at the academy 3 years ago. She proposed a theory that mana obeys the law of conservation. It is neither created nor destroyed, but only transforms from one form to another. They nearly burned her at the stake for heresy. She was expelled. Now she lives somewhere in the elven forests. Her name is Song Ji-un. Arthur smiled. For the first time in 2 weeks, the law of conservation of energy. The first law of thermodynamics. This elf had independently derived the first law of thermodynamics in a world where prayer had replaced physics. He needed this woman, immediately. He told the princess he was going to the elven forests. The princess objected. The road was dangerous. The demons had stepped up their patrols. The cardinal might take advantage of his absence. Arthur replied that he would travel quickly and light. Kate would go with him. Reinhard would remain in the capital and continue training the archers. Hilda would continue production. Madeline would look after the wounded in the refugee camp. The princess looked at him for a long time. Then she asked one thing. Will he return? Arthur replied that he would return. He had too many unfinished blueprints here. The elven forest began with a wall, not a metaphor, a real wall of intertwined trunks 20 meters high. The trees grew so thickly that a horse couldn't pass between them. Arthur and Kate left their horses at the edge of the forest and walked on. Kate moved silently, years of assassin training. Arthur moved noisily and knew it. The forest didn't want them here. Branches caught on their clothes, roots tripped their feet. The air was thick and humid and smelled of something sweet. Mana. The forest was saturated with mana, like a sponge with water. Arthur felt a second pulse in his chest. Hot. Fast. The arsenal system was reacting to the concentration of energy. Here, he could materialize an entire arsenal in an hour. But right now, he didn't need a gun. He needed a scientist. The elves found them first. 3 arrows stuck into the ground at Arthur's feet. A perfect triangle. A warning. A voice from above ordered him to stop and identify himself. Arthur stopped, raised his hands, identified himself. An envoy from the kingdom of Valderin, looking for a researcher named Song Ji-un. Silence. Then a rustle. 4 figures descended from the branches. Tall, slender, eyes like amber, long bows made of white wood, expressionless faces, elven border guards. The elder asked why he was looking for Song. Arthur replied that he wanted to offer her a job. The elder smirked. He said that Song was not respected among her people, a heretic, an outcast. She lives alone in a hut on the edge of the forest. No one visits her. No one speaks to her. Arthur asked if he could go to her. The elder shrugged. He said they didn't care about the outcast. Let him go. But if the strangers harm the forest, the arrows won't hit the ground. The hut stood in a clearing by a stream. Small, crooked, a bark roof. In front of the entrance, on ropes strung between the trees, were sheets of parchment inscribed with formulas. Arthur stopped. He read the nearest sheet. The symbols were unfamiliar. Local mathematical notation. But the structure. He recognized the structure. Integrals. This woman had invented integral calculus on her own. An elf woman emerged from the hut, long silver hair tangled and dirty, rock crystal glasses on her nose. Her hands were stained with ink up to her elbows. Her clothes were worn. She was thin, too thin. She looked at them warily, like a small animal ready to run. Arthur said his name was Arthur. He was from another world. He knew that she had discovered the law of conservation of mana, and he had come to tell her she was right. Song blinked. Then she blinked again. She asked how he knew about her work. Arthur replied that Theodorus had told him, but he didn't need to be told. A single glance at her formulas was enough for him. Mana is neither created nor destroyed. Mana transforms from one form to another. The total amount of mana in a closed system is constant. This is the first law of thermodynamics in his world. She had discovered it on her own, 40 years earlier than anyone had expected. Song stood motionless. Then she took off her glasses, wiped them, put them back on. Her lips were trembling. She asked what thermodynamics was. Arthur sat down on a log in front of the hut and began to explain for 3 hours. He spoke about physics, about Newton's laws, about the conservation of energy, about kinetic and potential energy, about waves, about gas pressure, about how expanding gas pushes a piston, and the piston turns a wheel, and the wheel drives a machine. He drew on the ground with a stick, formulas, diagrams, graphs. Kate sat off to the side, cleaning her rifle. She wasn't interested in the conversation. Song sat across from Arthur. She didn't move. She didn't blink. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she didn't notice them. When Arthur finished, she was silent for a minute. Then she spoke quietly. Her whole life, her entire life, she had known that the world was governed by rules. Not by the will of the gods, but by rules. She sensed patterns. She saw patterns. She tried to record them. For this, they called her a heretic. They expelled her from the academy. They banished her from the community. For 3 years, she lived alone in the forest and thought she had gone mad. And now, a man from another world had come and told her she wasn't crazy. That in his world, millions of people know what she had been trying to discover. That every one of her insights has a name, a formula, and proof. Arthur held out his hand. He said one thing. He needed a head of the research department. Someone who understands how mana works at a fundamental level. Someone who could bridge the physics of his world with the magic of this one. Ms. Song. She is ready to head his department. Song wiped her face with her sleeve, smudged the ink even more. Then she took his hand, firmly, and said one word. Yes. The return trip took 3 days. Song rode on the horse like a sack of potatoes. She admitted she'd never ridden before. Kate rode silently beside her and grabbed her by the collar every time she started to slide off. By the evening of the first day, Kate had declared Song hopeless. By the morning of the second, she was silently sharing her crackers with her. By the evening of the third day, she grumbled that if the elf fell off the horse one more time, Kate would tie her to the saddle. Arthur watched this and thought that a team was forming. A surprise awaited them at the edge of the forest. 5 demon assassins, rank B, fast, silent, professional killers. They attacked at night, without warning, shadows from the shadows. The first strike hit the horses. 2 animals fell with their throats slit. The third one was next. Song flew to the ground. Kate reacted before Arthur. Not a rifle. Knives. 2 throws into the darkness. A gasp. 1 demon assassin fell with a blade in his throat. Arthur drew his pistol. APM. 9mm. Close combat. 3 shots. 2 hits. The second demon collapsed. The third was faster. A claw strike. Arthur rolled back, his jacket torn from shoulder to elbow. Blood. Not deep. Kate fired her rifle from her knee. 20 meters. In the dark. At a moving target. Hit in the head. The fourth demon lunged at Song. The elf lay on the ground, helpless, unarmed. The demon swung its claws. Song raised her hand. A flash. Pure mana. No spell. No incantation. An instinctive burst of energy. The demon was thrown back 10 meters. He crashed into a tree. His spine snapped. The 5th demon retreated into the forest. Arthur fired at him. Missed. Darkness swallowed him. Silence. Arthur bandaged his arm. He looked at Kate. She was reloading her rifle. Her hands weren't shaking. He looked at Song. The elf was sitting on the ground, staring at her palms. They were glowing. Arthur walked over to her. He asked what she had done. Song replied that she didn't know. She'd been scared, and the mana had just come out on its own, like a reflex. Arthur nodded. He mentally added a point to the list. Song wasn't just a theorist. She had a massive mana reserve. She'd simply never learned to use it because the Academy had rejected her before she'd completed her combat training. The 5th demon was gone. That meant one thing. Bel'gazoth knew about Arthur. Assassin demons didn't hunt by chance. They had been sent, purposefully, for his soul. The hunt had begun. Arthur stood up. He reloaded his pistol. He told the 2 of them they needed to move faster. Valderin was waiting, and there was twice as much work to do. The return to Valderin brought 2 pieces of news, one good and one bad. The good news. Hilda had set up production. The forge was running 2 shifts, 25 barrels a week. The first batch of cartridges was made entirely from local materials. The gunpowder was stable. The soot was acceptable. Reinhard had trained another 30 marksmen. The second platoon of refugees was training and showing unexpected results. People with nothing to lose were learning faster than professional soldiers. The bad news: Cardinal Vandermeer left the capital. 380 Knights of the Order of Light left with him. They marched west toward Vandermeer Castle, the Cardinal's ancestral home. Militiamen from the villages joined them along the way. Nobles, priests, the Cardinal was gathering an army, not against the demons, against Arthur. Princess Leia reported this with a blank expression. Her voice was steady, her hands were calm, but Arthur saw the vein throbbing in her temple. She was losing her country, piece by piece. She was 22 years old and torn between saving the world and civil war. Arthur said he would figure it out. Later. Right now, he needed to use the time while the Cardinal gathered his forces. Every day without a demon attack was a day for production. Every barrel meant a life saved. He introduced Song to the court. The reaction was predictable. The mage Theodorus looked at her with interest, General Garrett with indifference. The courtiers looked at her with contempt. An elf, an outcast, a heretic, in dirty clothes and with ink on her face. Arthur said that this woman was smarter than everyone in this room put together, including himself. And in a year, they would all be grateful to her. Song was given a laboratory, a former alchemy workshop in the palace basement. Arthur gave her her first assignment: optics. He needed lenses for sights, glass ones, precise, with fixed magnification. Local glassmakers made stained glass and tableware. Precision optics were beyond their capabilities. Song studied the problem for a day. On the second day, she came to Arthur with a drawing, not glass lenses, crystalline ones. The crystals, which this world used as currency and fuel for spells, could be cut with micron-level precision. Their optical properties surpassed any glass. Arthur looked at the drawing. He looked at Song. He said she was a genius. Song blushed to the tips of her ears. She muttered that it was an obvious solution. Arthur countered that what is obvious to a genius is incomprehensible to the rest of us. A week later, the first crystal scope was ready. Arthur mounted it on the SVD. The clarity was perfect, 4 times magnification, and a bonus he hadn't expected. The magic crystal amplified the shooter's perception. Through this scope, Kate saw more than just the target. She saw thermal radiation, the flow of mana within the target's body, weak points. Kate fired 10 shots at 600 meters, all 10 to the head. She lowered the rifle, looked at Arthur, said that with this thing, she could hit a coin from a kilometer away. Arthur nodded. Mentally, he added another item to the list of victories. Magic and technology weren't competing. They complemented each other. Crystal optics were better than Earth's. The shooter's magical enhancement was better than any training simulator. Gunpowder and mana, not or, and. That was the answer to the Cardinal, not with words, with action. For the next 3 weeks, Arthur worked 18 hours a day. In the morning, strategy meetings with Reinhard. In the afternoon, in the workshop with Hilda on new models. In the evening, in the lab with Song on crystalline components. At night, in the infirmary with Madeline. She was mastering field medicine at an alarming rate. In 3 weeks, she learned how to perform blood transfusions, determine blood type, suture deep wounds, sterilize instruments. Arthur gave her an anatomy textbook. He materialized it from mana, a thick volume with diagrams of the human body. Madeline read it every night. In the morning, she would come with questions. She asked about internal organs, about the circulatory system, about infections. Arthur answered. Sometimes he knew the answer, sometimes he didn't. Then they looked it up together. Madeline no longer reported to the Cardinal. Arthur didn't ask when she had stopped. It didn't matter. She was here. She was healing people. She was teaching the other priestesses what she herself had learned. Within a month, the mortality rate from wounds at the Valderin infirmary had dropped by 40%. Without magic. Just clean bandages and alcohol and the knowledge of where to cut and where not to cut. Production was growing. Elde increased production to 40 barrels a week. At Wind a majority and terminated to be speaking. It didn't matter to the same matter. But the generally didn't matter to Feast. We didn't tell you here. It didn't matter put intruded fun. A bit magic. It's stum happy but 'tis more teacher people. Without magic, it mattered to cheese. The production was growing. Eldain increased the production. Alday increased the production of jumps in place and she was fit. A lead in just cover to come. Because then there was a tongue car of the time, which is no long around the movement at the fit, in month. She was people, it's providing influence of another month. She was letting from a 40% of head and crust themself. 11-month production was link, and was been one former of people in the way. Without magic insetted ready between tension and parmination. She first find back in mall, and the best time of generally professional week. She liked to find the mistake of the critical care. It's still not mind, because she cames about 40 years of labors, and she mate, essentially a find-a-purpose partner self's blacking. A left such critical children, and she made a ponchet the free. The road and has been met her. But the mean days that she is just intention. The money and has late, and she had some tough component in month, and sense of children has not believe. Arthur makes him pieced, but the ulivert of the particular that we were coming all in the first room. It's a few sterity and finishedly leafed. But the most of one sentence, it the open magic included in the room and backsicle leafed. Like she droop, and she goes them parter. Even proof. The capsule's a great finks, and she deplayed her faith book questions, but they were so for me. It made have clearly building to investigation said. A left sedge purpose than purposes at the vand and pain with labor kids, and she considered them defined. A left in relates to be that. It's not likely the questions in the big, it's for me. The most of magic absolutely more in the provided contract. Arthur didn't ask when she had stopped. It didn't matter. She was 30 years about way, and more television in the room to the most problem. Relatively more, they just like my month of is all of claimly. It doesn't matter. But the democratic that she was begins sheer. Arthur was clain, it didn't matter in a way the same matter, and she was lest from one people. She is right. It doesn't matter no work, and then use meeting me more. A left sedge critical children's to provide anyway. It's a starable that we work, but they were waiting with me more. A left that she didn't proved, but the universe that we shows it, after the she was limped, and she had potentially work. Arthur didn't ask when she was learned. It didn't matter of the freest. It still get match, and the transformly anyway. A left that she was much more deep. It still matter with me more. A formally had choose provide people. It still stain about wherein more. A left that she was much more deep said. It still be a bigness but they have match, and the Calder movement more. A left that she was watching the more. A left that she was much more deep. As much more built, it didn't believe the transmissed. The people of the mistake and companies performed it more. A left that you was be difficult in permanation. It's still just the penting than the more. A left that you was been so efficiently. It didn't matter that they would match, and fished. Arthin a month a becomes fish, and multiple and more than fished in father and step limb. A left that you was truggled, and incent between more problem. A left that she was making believe that she was much. It still visit in the more. A left that you was come in place the more. A left that you was lest. Arthur didn't ask when rowing, which is local together about, in what was more believe. It still looked to so similar than I murder. It still just explained. A left that you was come into me. A left that you was happy but you can share. A left that you was lest. It's been formed that they would match, and 50-cent month of the particular approaches that they would work. A left that you was make people more. A left that you was a new more. It still deceplet the way that she was lest. A left that you was performed in the more. A left that you was make belim. It still get me a more faced, and steplet the more. A left that you was come and believe. It still just the place more built. It still didn't matter. A left that you was look to me. It still didn't matter. It still description of the more. A left that you was beings, and she was actually more in the more important. A left that you was more built. It's still just 65 than you can be coming. A left that you was make feature and formly. A left that you was make more important. It's still just a biggest many time and stage, and she skilled me more built. A left that you was make feature, and she didn't matter and more built. A left that you was make more important, and the main that where we have in home in the more. A left that you was make feature, and she clean in herm in the more. A left that you was make feature, and she consider the more. A left that you was make more important. It's still just the future and the more. A left that you was make feature, and she being me more built. A left that you was make people and coming on. A left that you was make feature, and she didn't matter and more. A left that you was make more important. It's still just the more and the more. A left that you was make people and coming on. A left that you was make feature, and she should feel more important. A left that you was make built. It's still just the future and the more. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make more important. A left that you was make feature, and she knew that they would matter. A left that you was make feature, and she potentially more important. Without magic between road of our next time, that she was limped in the more. A left that you was make feature, and she should be available to me. A left that you was make feature, and she had one important. A left that you was make feature, and she pushed them in lively in the more. A left that you was make feature, and she had ready did the more. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she had ready did the more. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she had met it to more. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left that you was make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. A left the Jew is make feature, and she make feature. Is 1 to 40 barrels a week. She opened a second workshop. She recruited apprentices from among the local blacksmiths. Her father, the guildmaster, sent a letter. He demanded that she return to the mountains. He said a woman had no place at the head of arms production. Her brother was to be the heir. Hilda read the letter. A 122mm howitzer. Hilda looked at the drawing. Her eyes lit up. She asked what it was. Arthur replied that this was the next level. If a machine gun stops infantry, this thing stops everything else. Hilda studied the drawing until morning. The next day she came in with 20 questions. A week later she began work on the first prototype. Arthur knew that a working howitzer was still a long way off. The 122 caliber required a different grade of steel, a different level of machining precision, a different powder charge, months of work, but they were heading in the right direction. At the same time, news arrived from the north. The demons were preparing a new assault. Reinhard's intelligence had intercepted the reports. Bel'gazoth had sent an army of 15,000, not goblins, heavy infantry, rank C and B demons, berserker trolls, berserkers, and at the head, one of the 4 generals, Gorak the Black, rank S, a creature that single-handedly destroyed the capital of the old empire 10 years ago. Machine guns worked against the goblins. Against the trolls, a larger caliber was needed. Against an S-rank general, something was needed that Arthur hadn't created yet. He locked himself in his workshop for 2 days. He thought, he calculated, he sketched. He came out with a decision. He needed 3 things. First, machine guns, PKMs, 7.62 by 54 caliber, a heavy bullet for heavy targets. Second, mines, anti-personnel and anti-tank, more precisely, anti-troll. Third, for the general. Arthur closed his eyes and a blueprint unfolded in his mind. An RPG-7, a rocket-propelled anti-tank grenade, a cumulative charge, a searing jet of metal piercing a tank's armor, or the demon general's magical shield. The materialization took a week. Theodorus drained his mana until he was completely exhausted. 2 young mages from the academy volunteered to help. Song calculated the optimal mana transfer mode. Hilda was simultaneously forging casings for the mines. Madeline healed the mages from exhaustion after each session. Kate didn't leave Arthur's side. She remained silent. She cleaned her weapons. She scanned the surroundings. 2 night demon assassins tried to break into the workshop. Kate took them both out with a crystal sight from a distance of 400 meters, in the dark, without waking Arthur. In the morning, he saw 2 bodies by the fence and asked what had happened. Kate shrugged, said it was nothing important. By the end of the week, Arthur was holding 3 PKMs, 20 anti-personnel mines, 10 anti-tank mines, and 2 RPG-7s with 6 rounds. General Gorak the Black was marching on Valderin, 15,000 demons. Arthur spread the map out on the table. He looked at it. He looked at the princess. He said it was time to fight for real. Arthur chose a place for the battle, not the Grey Bridge, the Talvar Gorge, a narrow passage between 2 rock walls, 2 kilometers long, the only route for an army coming from the northeast. The demons had to pass through it to reach Valderin, a classic trap, the Thermopylae of this world. Arthur deployed his forces 3 days before the enemy's approach. The entrance to the gorge was mined, anti-personnel mines in a staggered pattern for the first 200 meters, anti-tank mines at the 300 and 400 meter marks. Deeper in, 3 machine gun nests on the rocks on both sides, PKMs with 500 rounds of ammunition each. Crossfire, sectors marked out, every machine gunner knew his zone. Even deeper, rifle positions, 80 assault riflemen, spread out, hidden behind rocks and sandbags. At the exit of the gorge, Kate with an SVD and a crystal sight, position on the cliff, 100 meters high, a view of the entire passage. Next to her, an observer with binoculars, a new guy from the refugees, a silent boy Arthur had picked up at the camp. He's already 13. He still hasn't started talking, but his eyes were razor sharp, and he read maps better than some of the officers. Arthur called him I. Separately, in the rear, 2 RPG crews for General Gorak. Arthur stood at the command post, a hill 300 meters from the gorge's exit. Reinhard was nearby. Princess Leia had insisted on being present. Arthur had objected. She said she wouldn't hide in the capital while her people were dying. He relented. He posted a guard of 10 riflemen around her. Theodora stood beside the magic shield, ready for action. The demons arrived at dawn. The earth shook beneath their footsteps. 15,000. The column stretched beyond the horizon. Heavy infantry led the way. Rank sea demons in black chitin armor. Behind them, trolls, huge, 3 meters tall, skin like stone. In their hands, clubs made from solid tree trunks. In the middle of the column, B-rank commanders. And somewhere deep within, Gorak the Black, S-rank. Arthur watched through his binoculars. He counted. He estimated their speed. The advance units entered the gorge. They didn't stop. They didn't send out scouts. 20 years of victories. 20 years of destroying everything in their path. They didn't know what an ambush was. They didn't know what a minefield was. They didn't know what crossfire was. They knew only one thing: to move forward, to kill. The first demon stepped on a mine at the 120-meter mark. The explosion tore him in half and took 2 others with him. The column froze for a second. Then it moved on. A second explosion, a third, a fourth. Mines were tearing through the front ranks. The demons didn't understand what was happening. The ground was exploding beneath their feet. An invisible threat, not magic, not a spell, not an arrow. The ground was simply killing them. There was no panic. The demons were more disciplined than the goblins. A rank B commander barked an order. The column picked up speed. It ran through the minefield. Acceptable losses. 12 killed, 24, a drop in the bucket for an army of 15,000. They broke through the minefield and entered the machine gun zone. Arthur gave the order over the radio, the first radio in this world. Primitive, crystal-based. Song had assembled it in 3 days from a magic crystal and copper wire. Range was 2 kilometers. The quality was abysmal, but it worked. 3 PKMs opened fire simultaneously. Crossfire, from the cliffs, top down. In the narrow gorge, the demons were like fish in a barrel. Heavy 7.62 bullets pierced the rank C chitin armor. Not on the first hit, but on the second and third. Bodies were falling. The column was squeezing together. Those in the back were pushing against those in front. Those in front were falling from the bullets. A classic meat grinder. The B-rank commanders tried to climb the rocks. Fast, strong. Their claws dug into the stone. Kate took out the first one from 400 meters. The crystal sight showed her a weak spot on his neck. 1 bullet. The second was taken out by a machine gunner from a position 20 meters away. A whole magazine at point-blank range. The third reached the machine gun nest. Killed the machine gunner. He smashed the PKM. Reinhard redirected fire from the 2 remaining positions. The rank B demon took 16 bullets and fell off the cliff. The battle lasted 2 hours. The gorge filled with bodies. The stench of blood and gunpowder hung thick in the air. The riflemen changed magazines. The machine gunners changed barrels. Arthur kept track of ammunition consumption. Bullets aren't infinite. The trolls broke through the no man's land in the 91st minute. Their chitinous skin withstood the 5.45. The PKM penetrated it, but slowly. The trolls climbed over their own corpses, as if they were ladders. They roared. They smashed rocks. One reached the rifle position. He flipped over the sandbags as if they were pillows. He grabbed a soldier. Arthur gave the order to the RPG crew. First shot. The grenade struck the troll in the chest. The cumulative jet burned through the hide like paper. The 3-meter-tall body collapsed. The soldiers around froze. Then they continued firing. Second troll. Third. Fourth. The RPG worked flawlessly. 6 shots. 6 dead trolls. Ammunition ran out. The remaining trolls were finished off with concentrated machine gun fire. By the 3rd hour, the demons began to retreat. For the first time in the history of this war, the demonic army was retreating not because a hero had defeated it, not because a 9th Circle mage had unleashed a firestorm upon it. It was retreating because ordinary people with iron tubes were killing it faster than it could advance. But the general did not retreat. Gorak the Black entered the gorge in person. Arthur saw him through his binoculars and froze. 5 meters tall, 4 arms, each as thick as a human torso. His skin wasn't black, it was crimson, like molten metal. The air around him shimmered with mana, a magical shield so dense that bullets bounced off before reaching his body. Kate fired. The bullet stopped in midair in front of his face and fell. Gorak looked in her direction. He smiled. Arthur gave the order to retreat. The archers left their positions, in an orderly fashion, according to plan. They moved toward the exit of the gorge. Gorak followed them. He took his time. Every step shook the ground. He raised his hand. A black bolt of lightning struck the rock. The stone exploded. Debris buried 2 shooters, the first casualties. Arthur clenched his teeth. He pulled out of his inventory the last thing he had for this situation. Not an RPG. The RPGs were gone. A mine. One. A special one. Not made of gnome steel, materialized from mana itself. Direct action. Song helped calculate the formula. A crystal mage at the core of the charge. Upon detonation, the crystal released the accumulated mana in the form of kinetic energy. Magic plus explosives. A hybrid charge. Arthur planted the mine in Gorak's path. He stepped back. He waited. Gorak stepped forward. The explosion was different. Not just fire and shrapnel, a wave of pure power. Gorak's magical shield took the blow. It held, but it cracked. For the first time in the entire battle, the S-rank general stopped. He looked down. He looked around. Arthur saw his eyes. Surprise. Not pain. Not fear. Surprise. Something had managed to damage his shield. It was impossible. And yet, Gorak turned away, not out of fear, out of calculation. He didn't know what kind of weapon it was, didn't know how many such charges the enemy had, didn't know the limits of this new threat. For the first time in decades, the demon general faced the unknown, and he chose retreat. The demon army marched north. Arthur stood at the entrance to the gorge, surrounded by bodies, thousands of bodies, the stench of death. Princess Leia stood beside him. She looked at the battlefield, then at Arthur, then back at the field. She asked quietly, how many had they lost? Arthur answered, 2 killed, 7 wounded. Madeline was already at work. The princess closed her eyes. Her shoulders trembled. She wasn't crying, not in front of others, but Arthur saw. 2. out of 80 against 15,000. In any other battle of this war, the defenders' losses had numbered in the hundreds. Arthur placed his hand on her shoulder. He said quietly that those two had not died in vain, and that he would do everything to ensure there were even fewer casualties next time. The princess opened her eyes. She looked at his hand, then at him. She didn't pull away, for the first time. After the Talvar Gorge, the world had changed. Not immediately, not because of a single event, but Arthur could feel the tectonic plates shifting. The gnome clans had sent not a delegation, an army. 3,000 heavily armored infantrymen with axes and hammers, and a letter from the Council of Clans. They wanted to join the coalition. There was one condition: blueprints. All the blueprints. Full access to the technology. Arthur agreed without hesitation. Hilda held a meeting with the gnome craftsmen. Over 12 hours of non-stop discussion, they developed a plan to build an arms factory in the mountains. Not a workshop, a factory. Assembly line production. 100 barrels a day, then 200, then 1,000. Hilda was glowing. For the first time, Arthur saw her like this. Not reserved, not focused, happy. She wasn't just building a factory. She was building the future of her people, and no father could stop her. The elves arrived 3 weeks later. Not an army, 12 sages, elders, ancient beings with eyes that reflected centuries. They wanted to speak with Song, not with Arthur, with Song, the outcast they had banished 3 years ago. Song met them in the lab, in a dirty lab coat, with ink on her cheek. Her glasses had slipped to the tip of her nose. All around her were piled crystalline instruments and blueprints and stacks of parchment with formulas. The eldest of the sages was silent for a minute. Then he bowed, low, to the ground. He said they had been wrong, that Song had seen what they had not, that her theory on mana conservation was confirmed every day by the existence of hybrid weapons, that the elven people asked for forgiveness. Song stood there. She looked at them. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. Then she said quietly, "Forgiveness is accepted. And now, if they wish to help, she needs 70 crystal blanks for lenses and 4 tons of purified mag crystal for radio communication experiments." Arthur stood by the door and smiled. The sages agreed. The Steel Coalition was officially formed a month after the Gorge. 4 races, humans, gnomes, elves, and halflings, who arrived last and silently fell into line because the demons had burned their burrows and they had nowhere else to go. Arthur drafted the charter: a single command center, uniform weapons standards, a unified communication system. Radio. Song had brought the crystal radio up to an acceptable standard. Range, 20 kilometers, 10 stations, 1 for each major detachment. Unipark. Arthur found her in the 3rd week after the coalition was formed. 17 years old, a former refugee, the daughter of a murdered village headman. She worked as a workshop at Hilda's weapons factory. Small, quiet, eyes that held too much pain for her age. Hilda brought her to Arthur and said the girl was strange. She hardly speaks, but she calculates faster in her head than any mage, and she remembers everything she hears, word for word. Arthur spoke with her. Una answered in short sentences. She stared at the floor. Her hands clutched the edge of her apron. He asked what had happened to her family. Una recounted it without emotion. Demons came at night. Her father went out with an axe. They killed him first. Her mother hid Una in the cellar. Una heard everything through the floorboards. Screams, blows, silence. When she came out, the village was gone. Arthur was silent. Then he asked if she wanted to learn something new. Not weapons, communication. Una looked up. For the first time, she looked him straight in the eye. She asked what a connection was. Arthur showed her a radio. He explained the principle. Sound turns into a signal. The signal travels through a crystal. Another crystal receives it and turns it back into sound. One person's voice can reach 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000. Communication is when no soldier on the battlefield is left alone. When the commander hears everyone, and everyone hears the commander. When help comes not through a messenger who rides for an hour, but through a word that travels instantly. Yuna listened. She didn't blink. Then she took the radio in her hands. She turned the dial. She found the frequency. She spoke her first words. Testing the connection. And at the other end of the camp, Reinhard replied. Connection established. Yuna smiled. A small, barely noticeable smile. Her first smile in a year. Arthur appointed her chief of communications. Within a month, Yuna knew every frequency, every call sign, every protocol. She sat in the command bunker in front of 10 stations, coordinating the movements of units across the entire front. Her voice sounded steady and calm over the airwaves. No panic, no fear. A 17-year-old girl who had lost everything became the nervous system of an entire army. Months passed. Arthur didn't stop. Production grew exponentially. The gnome factory reached 200 barrels a week, the ammunition factory nearby, the gunpowder factory in the valley. Song developed crystalline batteries for radio stations. Their mana capacity allowed them to operate for 3 days without recharging. Hilda began assembling the first howitzer prototype. The barrel was cast on the 4th attempt, the carriage on the 7th attempt, the recoil mechanism on the 12th. Every failure is data. Every piece of data is a step forward. Arthur began lecturing at the Royal Academy. Twice a week. A hall with 200 seats. 30 people attended the first lecture. 60 attended the second. By the third, the hall was full, and students were sitting on the windowsills. Arthur talked about physics, about chemistry, about mathematics, not as a scientist, but as a storyteller, like a host of a channel with 2 million subscribers. He knew how to explain the complex simply. He knew how to hold an audience. He knew how to make Newton's laws sound like an adventure. Half the mages at the academy were in shock. Their worldview was cracking. Mana is not a gift from the gods, but a form of energy. A spell is not a prayer, but a formula. A magical shield is not a miracle, but a redistribution of kinetic energy. Everything can be measured. Everything can be calculated. Everything can be improved. The other half of the mages signed up as cadets, young, hungry for knowledge, ready to break the mold. Song led seminars on the theoretical physics of mana, Arthur on applied engineering, Hilda on metallurgy, Madeline on field medicine. The academy was transforming from a temple of tradition into a research center. Cardinal Vandermeer watched all this from afar. His army was growing, 5,000, 10, 15. Everyone who feared change flocked to him. Nobles who were losing their privileges, mages who were losing their monopoly, priests who were losing their flock, peasants who had been convinced that gunpowder was a curse. Arthur knew. Reinhard reported. Counterintelligence was working. A clash was inevitable. But Arthur didn't want war with people. He had come here to kill demons, not his fellow citizens. There had to be another way. He thought about it every night. Lying on a hard cot in the workshop, Kate slept nearby on the floor, curled up in a ball, her rifle within reach. She never left, and she had no intention of leaving. 4 months after the call to arms, Arthur sat on the fortress wall and watched the sunset. The princess sat down beside him, silently. They often sat like that, without words. Two people who carried too much on their shoulders. Leah asked quietly if he was afraid. Arthur answered that he was, every day. She asked what of. He answered that he was afraid of not making it in time, of not doing enough, of not giving these people what they needed before Bel'gazoth delivered the final blow. Leah rested her head on his shoulder. Arthur froze. She said quietly that he had already given them more than all 5 heroes before him combined. He had given them hope. Arthur wanted to reply. He didn't get the chance. Yuna interrupted over the radio. An urgent message from intelligence. Cardinal Vandermeer had declared a crusade. His army was marching on the capital. 100,000 men. Arthur stood up. He looked at the sunset. He looked at the princess. He said one thing. Well then. The cardinal's army was marching on the capital. 100,000, not soldiers, people, peasants with pitchforks, nobles in ceremonial armor, militiamen with hunting bows, priests with crosses and prayers, knights of the Order of Light in shining armor. Arthur stood on the wall and counted. 100,000. He had 4,000 riflemen, 300 automatic rifles, 3 machine guns, 1 howitzer, a prototype. Hilda had perfected it over the past week. The first test shot blew a boulder to pieces from a distance of 2 kilometers. Hilda watched the cloud of dust and stone fragments and said quietly that it was the most beautiful thing she had ever created. From a mathematical standpoint, Arthur could stop this army. 100,000 untrained people against 4,000 riflemen in fortified positions, machine guns, assault rifles, mines, a howitzer. He could turn the approaches to the capital into a graveyard, and he couldn't let that happen. These are people, not demons. People who have been deceived, intimidated, and brainwashed by sermons. Peasants who believed they were defending their faith and their gods from a stranger with thunderous weapons. Arthur couldn't shoot them. He couldn't, and he wouldn't. The War Council convened 2 days before the Cardinal's army arrived. General Garrett proposed leading the troops outside the walls and engaging the enemy on the approaches. Arthur refused. Reinhard proposed striking the Cardinal's camp at night, a diversion, kill the command. The army would fall apart without a leader. Arthur refused. Theodorus proposed a magical illusion, to scare them, disperse them without bloodshed. Arthur thought. He shook his head. No. Deception doesn't solve the problem. Deception only postpones it. Kate sat in the corner, cleaning her rifle, silent. Then she said quietly, 1 shot, 800 meters. The Cardinal falls. The army goes home. Arthur looked at her. She looked back. Green eyes, not a shadow of doubt. For her, it was simple. Problem, solution, target, shot. Arthur said no. Princess Leia was silent throughout the council. Then she asked what he was going to do. Arthur answered. He would go out to them, alone, unarmed, and he would speak. Silence. General Garrett said it was suicide. Reinhard said it was madness. Theodorus said the Cardinal would order him killed on the spot. Kate stood up. She said that if he went out, she would go with him. Arthur replied no. He needed her on the wall, with a rifle, not to shoot, so that he knew she was covering him, just in case. Kate clenched her jaw. She nodded. The princess approached him after the council meeting, took his hand. Her fingers were cold. She said one thing, come back. Arthur replied that he would return. He always returns. Morning. The Cardinal's army stood before the walls of the capital. 100,000 men filled the plain from horizon to horizon. Banners of the Order of Light, crosses, a golden sun on a white field. At the front, on a white horse, Cardinal Aurelius Vandermeer, in white robes, with a staff, a face like a mask, eyes like glass. Behind him, 400 knights in full battle armor. Arthur stepped out of the gate, alone, without armor, unarmed, in a simple shirt and pants. Archers stood on the wall behind him. Kate lay in position with her SVD, finger on the trigger guard. Not on the trigger guard, for now. On the other side of the wall, Princess Leia stood motionless, hands clenched, face pale. Next to her, Yuna with a radio, Madeline with a medical bag, Hilda with her fists clenched, Song with her eyes closed, mana glowing around her fingers. Arthur walked across the field, alone, toward an army of 100,000. The knights lowered their lances. The Cardinal raised his hand. He ordered them to stop. He looked down at Arthur. He asked why he had come. Arthur stopped 20 paces away. He looked at the Cardinal, then at the knights, then at the army behind them, at thousands of faces, young, old, frightened, angry, confused. He began to speak, not loudly, but every word carried far. Theodorus had cast a spell to amplify the sound. Arthur had arranged this with him beforehand. He spoke for 40 minutes, not about himself, not about gunpowder, not about technology, about them, about the people standing before him. He asked them, How many of you have lost loved ones to demons? Hands went up. Thousands of hands. He asked. How many of you have seen demons burn villages? Hands, he asked. Who among you defended your family with a sword? Who among you defended your family with prayer? Who among you defended your family with magic? And did it work? Silence. He spoke of the Grey Bridge. 100 ordinary people stopped 2,000 demons. Without magic, without heroes, without prayers. He spoke of Talvar Gorge. 80 people stopped 15,000. They lost 2. In any other battle, the losses would have been in the hundreds. He spoke of the infirmary, of Madeline, of how clean bandages and knowledge of anatomy save more lives than healing magic. He spoke of Una, a 17-year-old girl who coordinates the army and whose voice on the air ensures that no soldier is left alone on the battlefield. He spoke of Hilda, a female blacksmith who was barred from her father's workshop, yet built a factory that arms an entire coalition. He spoke of Song, a scientist who was called a heretic for daring to think. He spoke of Kate, a girl who was turned into a weapon at the age of 8 and who, for the first time in her life, decides for herself who to protect. Then he fell silent. He looked at the cardinal, and he spoke quietly, but everyone heard. The cardinal says that his weapon is heresy, that the gods do not approve, that gunpowder offends them. Arthur asked one thing. Where had the gods been for 20 years? Where were they when demons were killing children? Where were the prayers when capitals were burning? 5 heroes came and died. The gods were silent. The church was silent. The mages were silent. And now, when he had given ordinary people the chance to defend themselves, without magic, without heroes, without the chosen ones, now they tell him this is heresy. He looked at the army, at 100,000 faces, and spoke his final words. He wasn't asking them to believe him. He was asking them to think, to go home, to hug their children, and to ask themselves one thing. If demons came to their village tomorrow, what would they want in their hands? A prayer or a weapon? Silence hung in the air for a minute. 2. Then a man stepped forward from the front ranks, not young, in simple peasant clothes, with a pitchfork. He approached Arthur, looked him in the face, said that demons had killed his wife and 2 daughters 4 years ago. He had prayed every day. The gods had not answered. The church had given him comfort, but not protection. He laid the pitchfork on the ground and stood next to Arthur. A second man stepped forward, a third, a 10th, a 100th. A stream of people flowed from the cardinal's army toward Arthur like a river changing its course. The cardinal shouted. He ordered them to stop. The knights did not move. The priests recited prayers. No one listened. 20 minutes later, 2 groups stood before the capital's walls, 40,000 with Arthur, 60,000 with the cardinal. But 60,000 were no longer an army. They were a crowd, confused, uncertain, watching as their comrades left one by one. The cardinal watched this. His face did not change. His eyes did not change. But his hands on the staff trembled. He understood everything. His world was crumbling. Not from bullets, not from bombs. From the words of a single man who stood before the army in a shirt and spoke the truth. The cardinal turned his horse around. He rode away, slowly, without looking back. The knights followed him, but not all of them. 120 knights remained. They dismounted. They took off their helmets. They lined up alongside the peasants who, a minute ago, had been their enemies. The cardinal's army fell apart within an hour. People went home, quietly, without anger, without joy, with heavy thoughts. Arthur stood in the middle of the field, alone. His legs wouldn't hold him. The adrenaline was fading. His hands were shaking. 40 minutes on his feet in front of 100,000 people, unarmed, unprotected. It was the most terrifying battle of his life, more terrifying than the Gorge, more terrifying than demons, because he could shoot at demons. Kate found him. She ran up, grabbed him by the shoulders, her eyes wild, green, wet. She said that if he ever went out unarmed against an army again, she would personally shoot him so that no one else would have time to. Then she hugged him, briefly, tightly, and let go, and she left, without looking back. In the evening, news arrived. Cardinal Aurelius Vandermeer was found dead in his tent, not murdered, by his own hand, a sword through his heart, a letter on the table, one line, "The gods were silent." Arthur read it, folded it, put it in his pocket. He stood by the window for a long time. He looked at the night sky. This man had been his enemy, a fanatic, a saboteur, but he had been true to his faith until the very last second, and when that faith crumbled, he could not live without it. Arthur did not celebrate victory. There was no victory. There was just one dead old man who had believed too strongly. After the Cardinal's fall, Arthur didn't allow himself a single day of rest. Time was working against him. Bel'gazoth wasn't sitting in the north for no reason. Reinhardt's intelligence was reporting alarming news. The demons were regrouping. 4 S-rank generals were assembling a united army. Not 15,000 like Gorax, 200,000, the full might of the demonic continent. Bel'gazoth was preparing the final blow. Arthur unfolded the map on the War Council table. He circled the northern continent in red. He drew a line from the demonic citadel to Valderin, a straight line, 1,200 kilometers, across the scorched lands of 3 fallen empires, through dead cities and burned forests. He said they had a year at most, maybe a year and a half. Bel'gazoth let them grow stronger, not out of mercy, out of curiosity. He wanted to see what the new enemy was capable of. But curiosity has its limits. When Bel'gazoth realizes that firearms are not a gimmick, but a systemic threat, he will strike with everything he has. Arthur laid out the plan, the Manhattan Project, a name that meant nothing in this world, but carried the weight of an entire era in his mind. 3 prongs simultaneously. First, the army. Bring the number of riflemen up to 30,000. Standardize the weapons. Assault rifles, machine guns, grenade launchers, artillery, 122mm howitzers. Hilda promised mass production in 4 months. Mortars, easier to manufacture, faster, more effective against clusters of infantry. Multiple rocket launchers. Arthur knew the design of the BM-21 Grad. 40 launch tubes, 122mm caliber, range of 20 kilometers. A single unit covers an area of 1 hectare. It was difficult, very difficult, but Hilda and the gnomes were already working at a level Arthur hadn't expected to see for at least another year. Second, aviation. Arthur remembered the structure of a biplane, the simplest design, wood and fabric, an internal combustion engine. Song was working on this, not a gasoline engine, a mag crystal engine. The crystal converted mana into mechanical rotation, pure energy, no fuel. The first engine prototype started up in the 5th month. Song stood in front of the spinning propeller and wept with joy. Hilda stood nearby and grumbled that the bearings were junk and needed to be redone. Arthur stood behind them and thought, calculating. If the engine produced 100 horsepower, the biplane would lift the pilot and 100 kilograms of bombs. That would be enough. Third, the bomb. Arthur adjourned the meeting. He asked Song and Hilda to stay. The princess, Theodorus, and no one else. He explained, on Earth, there existed a weapon capable of destroying an entire city with a single strike, a nuclear weapon. Based on the fission of an atomic nucleus, the explosion releases energy equivalent to millions of tons of conventional explosives. He knows the principle. Implosion type, spherical assembly, compression of nuclear material to critical mass. But he doesn't know the details at the engineering level. He doesn't know the exact parameters of the compression lens system. He doesn't know the metallurgy of plutonium. He doesn't know about neutron initiators. On Earth, thousands of scientists worked on this for 3 years. Arthur won't be able to replicate it on his own, but he doesn't need the earthly approach. He has something Oppenheimer didn't have. Mana. Song raised her hand, asked for a minute, left. She returned with a sheet of parchment covered in formulas. She said that for the past 2 months, she had been working on the theory of mag crystalline resonance. If 2 crystals of a certain structure collide with sufficient force, their internal mana is released completely. Not like a spell, like an explosion, uncontrollable, destructive. She calculated that 2 crystals, each weighing 10 kilograms, would release energy comparable to a small earthquake if they collided correctly. Arthur looked at the formulas. He looked at Song. He said that this was exactly what he needed. Not nuclear fission, magical crystalline, same principle, different physics, but the result is the same: a tactical nuclear charge, mana-based. Song turned pale. She asked how many crystals were needed for such a charge. Arthur calculated in his head. If he extrapolated her formula, about 100 kilograms of the highest purity crystal would be needed for the equivalent of 15 kilotons. The structure was spherical, compression using conventional explosives. The detonators are synchronized to the microsecond. Song said it was madness. Arthur replied that madness was letting 200,000 demons reach the capital. Princess Leia listened in silence. Then she asked one thing. What would happen to the people near this weapon? Arthur answered honestly. Everything living within a 2-kilometer radius of the epicenter will perish. The shockwave will destroy structures within a 5-kilometer radius. The area will be magically contaminated for decades. This is not a weapon for the battlefield. This is a weapon for one specific target. The citadel of Bel'gazoth, the lair, the source of the rift. One bomb, one strike, the end of the war. The princess was silent for a minute. Then she nodded. She approved the program. Song was given a laboratory, not a basement one, a separate one, in a secret valley 40 kilometers from the capital. The Academy's 20 best alchemists and mages, full access to the reserves of magic crystals, absolute secrecy. Una secured a dedicated communication channel. Hilda took charge of the casing and the compression system. Madeline organized a medical station in the valley because working with concentrated mana caused the researchers headaches and nosebleeds. Arthur was torn between 3 fronts: the army, the air force, the bomb. He slept 4 hours at a time, ate on the go, was losing weight. Kate followed him like a shadow, made him eat, made him sleep. Once she physically dragged him away from the drafting table and laid him on a cot. Arthur tried to get up. Kate placed her hand on his chest and said that if he didn't sleep for 6 hours, she'd tie him up and hand him over to Madeline. Arthur looked at her. Freckles, a scar across her eyebrow, green eyes in which there was something that hadn't been there before. Not anger, not wariness, concern. He closed his eyes and fell asleep a minute later. 6 months after the call-up, the first biplane took to the air. The pilot was one of the young mages from the Academy. The crystal engine ran smoothly. The wings held firm. The aircraft rose to an altitude of 500 meters. It flew over the capital. People in the streets craned their necks. They shouted. They pointed. Children ran after it. The princess stood on the palace balcony. She looked up. Her face bore an expression Arthur would remember forever. Not delight, not fear, faith. The biplane landed on a field beyond the walls. It was a crooked landing. The landing gear cracked. The pilot climbed out of the cockpit, white as a sheet but smiling. Hilda inspected the landing gear. She said it was a disgrace, not a landing, and that she would personally rebuild the struts. Song recorded the instrument readings. The crystal engine had run for 20 minutes without a hitch. Power was stable. Mana consumption was minimal. Arthur looked at the biplane. He thought. In 3 months he would have a squadron. In 6 months an aviation corps. Biplanes with machine guns, biplanes with bombs, reconnaissance planes, bombers, attack planes, and then. He closed his eyes and a blueprint unfolded in his mind. Not a biplane, a jet. The Stalic engine made it possible. Mana was converted directly into jet thrust. No fuel combustion, no turbines, pure energy into pure motion. But that was later. Right now, biplanes. Right now, artillery. Right now, production. Every day, every hour, every minute. These were the lives he would save or fail to save. 8 months after enlistment. Arthur sat in the command bunker and looked at the map. The red markers of the demonic positions were retreating northward. The blue coalition markers were advancing. 3 border provinces had been liberated over the past month. The tactics were simple and brutal. Artillery demolished the fortifications. Snipers cleared out the infantry. Aerial reconnaissance in biplanes provided a complete picture of the enemy's movements. Una coordinated everything from the bunker. Her voice on the airwaves had become legendary. Her call sign was Swallow. When the soldiers heard Swallow, they knew they were being watched, that help was coming, that they were not alone. Arthur looked at the map and thought of Bel'gazoth. The demonic king was silent. His generals were retreating methodically, too methodically. Bel'gazoth wasn't losing the war. He was studying the enemy. Every retreat gave him data: rate of fire, range, caliber, tactical patterns, weak spots. Arthur recognized this approach. On Earth, it was called reconnaissance in force. Sacrifice 1,000 to understand how the enemy operates, and then strike where he least expects it. The news arrived in the 9th month. Reinhard burst into the bunker, his face ashen from sleeplessness. He said that a reconnaissance group on the northern flank had intercepted a demonic courier. He had a letter with him, in human language, addressed to Arthur personally. Arthur unfolded the parchment. The handwriting was neat. Letters of the Earth alphabet, not the local one. Latin. The text was in English. He read it, reread it, sat down. The letter read as follows. Dear colleague, I have been observing your actions over the past few months with professional interest. Gunpowder, rifled barrels, automatic weapons, firebag tactics, mass production. Impressive for a 21st century civilization. It took me 40 years to realize that this world cannot be saved by magic. It took you 40 days. You're faster than I am. That commands respect. But you're repeating my mistake. You think technology will save people from themselves. It won't. I tried. I tried for 200 years. They take your gifts and turn them into weapons against each other. Every single time, without exception. You gave them automatic weapons, and the first thing the Cardinal did was lead an army against you. Not against the demons, against you. Think about that. When you're ready to talk, send a red fire into the night sky. I'll come. Not as an enemy, as a man who has walked this path to the end and knows where it leads. Sincerely, Dr. Bel'gazoth. Arthur sat with the letter in his hands for 10 minutes. He didn't move. Bel'gazoth, king of the demons. An outsider. Not from this world. From Earth. No, not from Earth. From Earth's future, the 23rd century. A genetic engineer. A man who came here 200 years ago and tried to do the same thing Arthur did. To bring progress to this world. To bring technology. To give power to ordinary people. And the world broke him. Betrayed him. Cursed him. Turned him into what he became. Arthur showed the letter to the princess. Leah read it for a long time. Then she looked at him. She asked if he believed it. Arthur replied that he did. Earthly handwriting, earthly language, accurate knowledge of firearms. This isn't a trap in the usual sense. Bel'gazoth really does want to talk. Leah asked if he would go. Arthur replied that he wouldn't. Not now. First, he had to be strong enough to hold his own in the conversation. As long as he was weaker, Bel'gazoth would speak from a position of strength. And Arthur didn't negotiate from a position of weakness. Never. He put the letter away. He went back to work. The 10th month. Tanks. Arthur stood in front of Hilda and drew on the board. A tracked platform, an armored hull, a turret with 360-degree rotation, a 100mm cannon. He couldn't recreate the T-90 from memory. The electronics were too complex, the metallurgy too precise. But the T-34, a World War II relic, simple as a sledgehammer, reliable as scrap metal. Replace the diesel engine with a crystal one, armor made of gnome steel, a gun like the ones Hilda had already learned to make. Hilda looked at the drawing. She was silent. Then she said it was madness. Then she said she needed a month for a prototype. Then she said that if she had enough steel and manpower, she could produce a series in 6 months. Arthur nodded. He said they didn't have 6 months, 3 months. Hilda looked at him. Her eyes were like red-hot steel. She said 3 it is. The first tank rolled out of the shop 14 weeks later. Ugly, angular, with uneven armor and creaking tracks. Hilda called it a disgrace. Arthur called it a beauty. The tank drove 100 meters, turned around, fired its gun. The shell flew 2 kilometers and reduced a stone wall to dust. Hilda stood nearby. She watched. Then she turned to Arthur and said quietly, together, they had built something that would change this world forever. Arthur nodded. He placed his hand on her shoulder. Hilda didn't pull away. She placed her hand on top of his. Strong, calloused, warm. They stood like that for 5 seconds. Then Hilda went back to work. Meanwhile, the Manhattan Project was in full swing. Song conducted the first large-scale crystal resonance test. 200-gram crystals collided in a vacuum chamber. The explosion destroyed the chamber and half the lab. 3 researchers ended up in the infirmary with mana burns. Madeline treated them for 2 days. Song sat by their beds and cried. She said it was her fault. Arthur came in. He sat down beside her. He said it wasn't her fault. It was the price. People had died on Earth too when the first bomb was created. Scientists received lethal doses of radiation. Technicians died during experiments. That doesn't make them guilty. It makes them heroes. Song wiped away her tears. She asked if he thought they were doing the right thing. Arthur replied that he didn't know. But he knew that 200,000 demons were marching south, and if they weren't stopped, there would be neither right nor wrong. There would be nothing. Song nodded. She returned to the lab. A year after the call to arms, Arthur stood on a hill and looked at the army. His army. 30,000 riflemen, 200 artillery pieces, 50 tanks, 16 multiple rocket launchers, 3 squadrons of biplanes, 12 planes each, 1 squadron of jet bombers, 4 of them. Ugly, with crystalline engines that howled like hungry demons, speed 300 kilometers per hour, bomb load 500 kilograms. Song had calculated the design in a week. Hilda had built them in a month. The pilots were flying them for the second time in their lives. But they were flying. Everyone was standing nearby on the hill. Princess Leia, officially the queen. The coronation took place 2 months ago. Quiet, without pomp. Theodorus placed the crown on her head. Arthur stood by the wall and watched. Leia found him with her eyes in the crowd. She smiled, a small smile, just for him. Kate, sniper, bodyguard, shadow. For a year, she hadn't strayed more than 100 meters from Arthur. She slept at his door. She ate at his table. She shot better than anyone on the continent. 42 confirmed kills of demons ranked B and higher. She no longer said she hated him. She no longer said anything unnecessary. She just watched, with green eyes in which something burned that made Arthur uneasy. Song, head of the Manhattan Project, head of the Coalition's scientific division. Over the course of a year, she had grown from a hounded recluse into a person whom generals listened to. Her formulas drove the army. Her crystals powered the tanks. Her radio stations linked the front lines. She still wore a dirty apron and had ink on her cheeks. Arthur had long since stopped noticing it, or maybe not. He noticed it, but in a different way. Hilda, head of the Eisenberg Arsenal Manufacturing Consortium, 12 factories, 3,000 workers, 500 barrels a day, tanks, artillery, ammunition. Her father had sent a second letter. It contained a single word, proud. Hilda read it. She folded it, put it in the pocket near her heart, and went back to work. Madeline, chief military medic of the coalition, 200 field medics trained under her program, hospitals in every garrison, mortality from wounds below 10%. She no longer wore the church's cassock. She wore a white doctor's coat, a cross around her neck. She hadn't lost her faith. She'd simply found a new use for it. Una, head of communications, 18 years old, 40 stations across the front, 120 operators. She sat in the bunker 18 hours a day, coordinated the movements of every unit, remembered every call sign, every frequency, every name. The silent boy, Glaz, became her right-hand man. He turned 14. He never spoke, but his maps were works of art. Every position, every route, every firing point was marked with meter-level precision. Arthur looked at the army. He looked at the people around him. And he thought that for the first time in a year, he felt not anxiety, but something akin to confidence. A week later, a message came from intelligence. Bel'gazoth had moved out. 200,000 demons were marching south, led by 4 S-rank generals, Gorak the Black, Morgan the Shadow Witch, Cross the Devourer, and the 4th, nameless. The demons called him the Silent One, S+ rank. No one had seen him in battle. No one knew what he was capable of. That was what frightened them most. Arthur convened a war council, the last one before the offensive. He unfolded a map of the northern continent. He pointed out the route. Across the scorched lands, straight to the citadel. Operation Dawn. 3 phases. The first, defense along the Calder River line. Meet 200,000 demons in fortified positions. Artillery, minefields, tanks, air power. The objective is not to win, to delay, to tie them down in battle. While the main forces hold the front, the strike group breaks through to the north. Second, breakthrough. The hammer tank group, 20 tanks, 1,000 riflemen and armored personnel carriers. Improvised ones, trucks with armor plates. Ugly, but it works. The objective is to cut a corridor through the demonic rear to the citadel. Aviation provides cover. Jet bombers clear the way. Third, drop. 1 bomber. In the bomb bay, Little Arthur. A mag crystal charge with a yield of 15 kilotons in TNT equivalent. Song and Hilda had spent 4 months assembling it. 102 kilograms of purified mag crystal in a spherical casing. 32 synchronized detonators. Activation precision, 1 microsecond. 1 chance, 1 strike. Princess Leia listened. Then she asked who would fly the bomber. Arthur replied that he would. Silence. Kate stood up. She said no. Leia said no. Hilda slammed her fist on the table and said no. Song took off her glasses, wiped them, put them back on, and said no. Madeline folded her hands and closed her eyes and quietly said no. Una, on the line from the bunker, said no. Arthur looked at each of them. He said he trusted the coalition pilots, but this cargo was too important. If the bomber were shot down en route, and the bomb didn't explode, but fell into the hands of the demons, the consequences would be catastrophic. Arthur was the only one who fully understood the detonation system, the only one who could activate the charge manually if the automatic system failed, the only one who could destroy the bomb if things go wrong. He has to fly. Kate said that in that case, she's flying with him. Arthur started to object. Kate looked at him. Green eyes. Absolute calm. She said it wasn't up for discussion. If he's flying, she's by his side. She's his cover. Always has been. Always will be. Arthur nodded. Princess Leia approached him after the council meeting. Silently. She took his hands. Held them for a long time. Then she said quietly, she knew from the very beginning that he wasn't the type to send others. He was the type to go himself. She hates him for it, and loves him for it. Arthur looked at her, 23 years old, a queen, a warrior, a woman who had carried the weight of the entire world on her shoulders for 2 years and never once bent. He took the ring off his finger, a simple one, made of steel, materialized from mana on his first day in this world. He slipped it onto her finger. He said he would return. Leia clasped the ring. She nodded. She didn't cry, not in front of others. Arthur turned and walked toward the hangar. 5 women stood behind him. Each watched him go. Each understood something of her own, and each knew that if he didn't return, the world they had built together would stand without him. Because he had built it that way, to stand without him. The battle on the Calder River began at dawn on the 12th month. 200,000 demons advanced on the coalition's fortified positions, and for the first time in the history of this war, the demons were met not by walls or heroes. They were met by a system. The artillery opened fire first. 40 122mm howitzers. Shells rained down on the leading columns, 3 kilometers from the defensive line. The earth rose a wall. Rank C demons scattered like rag dolls. Berserker trolls withstood shrapnel, but a direct hit tore even them apart. The columns became disorganized. They slowed down. Rank B commanders tried to reorganize the ranks. Multiple launch rocket systems struck second. 16 launchers, 40 missiles each, 640 missiles in a single salvo. The area of destruction was 2 square kilometers. The demonic infantry in this sector ceased to exist as a combat unit. The survivors fled. For the first time in the history of the demonic army, the lower demons were fleeing not from a hero, but from the ground exploding beneath their feet. But there were 200,000 of them. The artillery couldn't destroy them all. The main body broke through the fire zone and reached the riflemen's positions. 30,000 assault rifles, 3,000 machine guns, a wall of fire. The front ranks of demons fell in heaps. But those behind them climbed over the corpses. They pressed forward with sheer mass, with numbers, an endless stream of bodies. General Gorak the Black entered the battle personally. His magical shield was stronger than it had been in the Gorge. He had learned. Bullets bounced off. Shrapnel didn't reach him. He walked through the firestorm as if through rain, and with every blow of his 4 arms he shattered the fortifications. A tank platoon came out to meet him. 10 vehicles, 100mm guns. The first shell struck Gorak in the chest. The shield held. But Gorak was knocked 20 meters back. He stood his ground. A second shell. A third. The shield creaked. Gorak roared. 10 tanks were firing at a single target, shell after shell. On the 7th hit, the shield burst. Shards of mana scattered in a fan. The 8th shell struck Gorak in the shoulder. It tore off his left upper arm. The 9th hit his chest. Gorak collapsed. For the first time in a century, an S-rank general had been defeated not by a hero, but by machines. But Morgana, the Shadow Witch, operated differently. She didn't charge head-on. Her magic was of shadows and deception. Entire units lost their bearings. Riflemen fired at each other. Artillery shelled their own positions. Chaos spread across the left flank. Reinhardt on the left flank requested assistance. Yuna redirected the reserves. 3 tanks and 200 riflemen moved in as reinforcements. Song, from the bunker, worked on a counterspell. Crystal emitters suppressed illusions within a 100-meter radius. Not much, but better than nothing. The battle lasted 16 hours. 6. 16 hours of unceasing fire and blood and thunder. The coalition's losses mounted. 200, 500, 1,000. Arthur stood in the command bunker and counted. Every number was a name. Every name was a person he had failed to save. But the line held. By the 17th hour, the demons retreated. They didn't flee. They withdrew in an orderly fashion. 2 generals were lost. Gorak is dead. Morgana was wounded and retreated. The Devourer, Cross, lost 1/3 of his forces and led the remnants away. The Silent One did not engage in battle at all. He stood in the rear. He watched. And that frightened Arthur the most. Of the 200,000 demons, about 70,000 survived. The coalition's losses were 4,200 men. The ratio, 30-1. In any other war, that would have been an absolute victory. For Arthur, it was 4,200 reasons not to sleep. Madeline worked for 3 days straight without stopping. Her medics were pulling the wounded off the battlefield, bandaging them, operating on them. Healer priestesses worked side by side with field surgeons, magic and medicine, mana and bandages, together. Arthur walked into the hospital on the 2nd day. He walked past the beds. He looked at the faces. Young, old, people, gnomes, elves, all together, all wounded for the same cause. He stopped at one bed, a soldier, a young guy, both legs below the knees, a troll. The guy was staring at the ceiling. He wasn't crying. Arthur sat down next to him. He was silent. The guy turned his head, looked at him, recognized him, said quietly that he had no regrets, that if he'd known beforehand, he'd have gone again. Because his sister and mother live in a village behind the front lines, and now the demons won't reach them. Arthur squeezed his hand, nodded, got up, and left. Madeline was standing by the door. She looked at him. She said quietly that it wasn't his fault. Arthur replied that it was his fault. Each of them was on his conscience. He had brought them here. He had given them weapons. He had sent them into battle. Madeline shook her head. She said that he had given them a choice. For the first time in their lives, they had decided for themselves what to fight for. That wasn't a fault. It was respect for them. Arthur looked at her. Dark hair, tired eyes, hands stained with the blood of others, a cross around her neck. She believed, not in the gods, in him, in them, in what they were doing. He nodded. He returned to the bunker. Phase 1 was complete. The demons were stopped. The main forces were tied up. The path north was open. The hammer tank group had set out at night. 20 tanks, 1,000 riflemen, Reinhard at the head. Arthur wanted to go with them, but Reinhard said no. His place was in the air, with a bomb. Arthur would wait for the signal. When the hammer broke through the corridor and reached the citadel, Una would transmit the code. Then the bomber would take off. 3 days. The hammer marched through scorched earth. Una transmitted coordinates every 2 hours. Reconnaissance biplanes flew ahead. Resistance was weak. Bel'gazoth had pulled his main forces back to Calder. The rear was exposed. The tanks advanced without stopping. On the second day, they encountered the garrison of a ruined city. 3,000 demons. The tanks plowed through them in 40 minutes. On the third day, the hammer reached the citadel. Reinhard radioed in. "The hammer is in position. The corridor is open. Waiting for the signal." Una turned to Arthur. She said one thing. "It's time." Arthur stood up, put on his flight jacket, grabbed his helmet, headed for the hangar. Kate walked beside him, silently, rifle on her back. Everyone was standing by the hangar. Leah, Song, Hilda, Madeline. Una emerged from the bunker for the first time in 3 days, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. Arthur stopped. He looked at each of them. He said that if he didn't return, everything they had built would remain standing. Because it didn't rest on him. It rested on them, on Hilda and her factories, on Song and her formulas, on Madeline and her hospitals, on Una and her connections, on Leah and her crown, on Kate and her rifle. He is the catalyst, not the foundation. They are the foundation. Leah squeezed the ring on her finger. Hilda nodded. Song was crying. Madeline was praying. Una just stood there and watched, and in her quiet eyes was everything. Arthur sat down in the bomber's cockpit. Kate sat down next to him. The engines roared. The crystals lit up. The plane rolled down the runway, gained speed, took off, gained altitude, heading north. The bomber flew at an altitude of 3,000 meters. Below, scorched earth stretched to the horizon. Black, dead. No trees, no rivers, no roads. 20 years of demonic rule had turned the north of the continent into a wasteland. Arthur sat at the controls. The crystal engines hummed steadily behind him. The instrument panel glowed a soft blue. In the bomb bay beneath his feet lay little Arthur. 102 kilograms of mag crystal encased in steel. 15 kilotons. Enough to wipe the citadel off the face of the earth and seal the rift forever. Kate sat beside him. She stared ahead, a rifle between her knees. Her hands were steady. She hadn't spoken a word since takeoff. Arthur looked at her, red hair peeking out from under her helmet, freckles on her cheekbones, a scar across her eyebrow. 19 years old, a child by the standards of his world, a warrior by the standards of this one. She felt his gaze, turned, green eyes, asked quietly what he was thinking about. Arthur replied that he was thinking about how he'd promised to return. Kate nodded. She said he would return, because she wouldn't let him not return. The radio came to life. Una's voice, steady, calm, a beacon across all frequencies. The Hammer tank group is in position. The corridor is clear. Air cover. 3 squadrons of biplanes. 12 jet fighters. Demonic flyers in the sector are minimal. The way is clear. Arthur confirmed. The bomber set a combat course. Ahead on the horizon, a citadel rose. Arthur saw it and went cold. Not a building, not a fortress, a living organism, a black mass of stone and flesh and mana. Towers grew from the ground like bones from torn skin. The walls pulsed. Around the citadel, the air quivered with the concentration of dark mana, and right at the center, a rift, a crack in reality. Violet light shot vertically from it into the sky. Demons had been coming through this hole for 20 years. Bel'gazoth had come through it. Darkness flowed through it. Closing the rift meant ending the war, forever. As they approached the citadel, they met resistance. Demonic flyers, creatures with leathery wings and claws. About 13 of them. The cover biplanes engaged. Bursts of machine gun fire tore the creatures to shreds. Jet fighters sliced through the swarm like knives through butter. Kate opened the side hatch. A cold wind blew into the cockpit. She lay down with her rifle, the crystal sight to her eye, and she began to work. One creature at 200 meters, two at 300, three in a row at 400. Every shot a hit. Every hit, a body plummeting to the ground. Arthur flew the bomber steadily. Course stable. Speed stable. Altitude 3,000. The citadel was approaching. 10 kilometers. 5, 3. And then he appeared. The silent one. The fourth general. Rank S+. He rose from the citadel like a black pillar of smoke. No wings. Levitation. Pure mana. A humanoid figure but irregular. Arms too long. A body too thin. His face hidden by a mask of black bone. Eyes like two white fires. The silent one did not attack. He raised his hands. The air around the bomber thickened. The engines wheezed. The crystals flickered. Mana was leaking from the engines. The silent one was sucking it out from a distance. The bomber began to lose altitude. 3,000. 2,500. 2,000. Arthur gripped the control stick. He looked at Kate. She was already taking aim. She fired. The bullet flew toward the silent one and stopped a meter from his body. It hung in the air. It fell. The magical barrier was denser than Gorax. Bullets were useless. Altitude, 1,500. The engines were dying. Arthur made his decision in 3 seconds. He pressed the emergency fuel crystal jettison button. 10 magic crystals from the engine compartment flew downward. The silent one reacted. He reached for them with mana, a reflex. He was used to absorbing energy. The crystals were energy. For half a second, his grip on the bomber weakened. Half a second. Arthur sent the plane into a nosedive, straight toward the citadel. Altitude, 1,000, 700, 500. Speed was increasing. Kate clung to her seat. Arthur opened the bomb bay. The silent one understood. He darted toward the bomber. Arthur saw him in the windshield. White eyes, black mask, outstretched arms. From the ground, the tanks of the Hammer Group fired. 20 guns at once. Shells flew at the silent one from all sides. They didn't penetrate the shield, but they forced him to look away. For a second. Just 1 second. Arthur pressed the release button. Little Arthur flew out of the bomb bay. 102 kilograms of steel and crystal plummeted downward, toward the citadel, toward the rift, toward the end of the 20-year war. Arthur yanked the control stick toward him. The bomber howled. The G-force pressed him into his seat. The machine pulled out of its dive on the last remnants of mana in the emergency crystals. Kate pressed herself against her seat. Her face was pale. Her eyes were closed. The silent one turned toward the falling bomb. He stretched out his hands, tried to intercept it, to absorb the mana, to stop it. But the bomb didn't run on mana. It fell according to physics, gravity, mass, acceleration, laws that don't depend on magic. The silent one grabbed the bomb with mana, slowed it down, almost stopped it. And at that moment, the altitude fuse went off. 32 charges of conventional explosives detonated simultaneously, in sync, with microsecond precision. A spherical shockwave compressed the mag crystalline core. 102 kilograms of crystal of the highest purity were compressed to the size of a fist. The crystal lattice shattered. All the mana was released at once. A flash. Arthur saw it even through his closed eyelids. White. Absolute. Like a second sun. The shockwave caught up with the bomber 4 seconds later. The plane was tossed like a twig. The fuselage cracked. The left wing snapped. Engine number 2 tore off and tumbled downward. Arthur held the control stick with both hands. His muscles were burning. His teeth were chattering. The plane was falling. Not flying. Falling. With one engine. With one wing. Kate opened her eyes. She looked at him. Calmly. Without fear. She said one thing. Pull. Arthur pulled. Altitude 200 meters. 100. 50. The ground was rushing toward them. The ruins of the citadel. Rocks. Dust. The bomber slammed into the ground belly first. The screech of metal. Sparks. Mud. The fuselage plowed a furrow 300 meters long. It came to a stop. Silence. Arthur opened his eyes. Alive. His arms were intact. His legs were intact. His head was buzzing. Blood from a cut on his forehead. He turned to Kate. She was hanging in her seatbelt. Her eyes were closed. Arthur went cold. He shook her by the shoulder. "Kate, Kate." She opened her eyes. Green, cloudy. She blinked, looked at him, said hoarsely that if he landed the plane like that again, she'd definitely shoot him. Arthur laughed, for the first time in 2 years. They climbed out of the cockpit, stepped onto the ground, turned around. Where the citadel had stood, there was nothing. A crater, a perfect circle 2 kilometers in diameter, deep. The bottom melted. The citadel's walls had vaporized. The towers were gone. The walls were gone. The silent one was gone. And the rift. The violet light had gone out. The crack in reality had closed. 20 years. 20 years of darkness. Ended in a single flash. Arthur stared at the crater. Kate stood beside him. She took his hand, firmly, silently. Tanks from the Hammer Group appeared on the horizon. Reinhard in the lead vehicle. Alive. His men were alive. The tanks stopped at the edge of the crater. The hatches opened. Soldiers climbed out and stood there, watching. At the hole in the ground that had been a citadel. At the sky, which for the first time in 20 years was clear over the northern continent. The darkness was dissipating. Demonic mana was fading from the air. Without the rift, without a source, the demons on the continent were losing their power. The lower ones simply dropped dead. The trolls were weakening. Rank B and C commanders were losing their magical boost. The army that had seemed endless was dying like an organism whose heart had stopped. The radio came to life. Yuna's voice, trembling for the first time in 2 years. "All frequencies, this is Yuna. The rift is closed. I repeat, the rift is closed. Demonic forces are in full retreat across all sectors." Arthur picked up the radio. He looked up at the sky. Clear, blue, with clouds, real clouds, not demonic darkness. He pressed the transmit button. "Yuna, to all frequencies, this is Kovalev. Tell the princess, I'm coming home." On the southern front, Princess Leia stood in the command bunker, a ring on her finger, her hands clasped over her chest. She heard his voice. She closed her eyes. Tears streamed down her cheeks, the first in 2 years. Beside her, Song took off her glasses and covered her face with her hands. Hilda stood upright, fists clenched, jaw set. Her eyes were shining. Madeline dropped to her knees. She folded her hands. She prayed. For the first time in a long time, she had someone to thank. Yuna sat in front of the radio, small, quiet, 18 years old. 2 years of war. Thousands of voices on the air. She heard them all, coordinated every one, didn't lose a single channel. And now she heard the voice of the man who had given her that voice, who had told her 2 years ago that connection is when no one is left alone. She pressed the transmit button. His voice was steady, calm, as always. "Copy that, Kovalev. Welcome home." The return took a week. Arthur and Kate walked to the Hammer's positions, then by tank to the Calder line, then on horseback to the capital. Along the way, they saw villages where people came out into the streets and stood silently, gazing at the sky, a clear sky, for the first time. Children who had never seen the sun without a demonic haze squinted and laughed and pointed at the clouds. Soldiers who had laid down their weapons and were sitting by the roadside, crying not out of grief, but because they no longer had to get up at 4 in the morning to check the minefields. At the gates of Valderin, the whole city came out to meet them. Arthur dismounted. Princess Leia stood on the palace steps, in a white dress, a crown on her head, a ring on her finger. She didn't run to him. She was a queen. Queens don't run. Arthur approached her himself. He stood before her. He looked into eyes the color of a winter sky. He said he had promised to return. Leia took his hand, squeezed it, pulled him close, embraced him. In front of the whole city, in front of the army, in front of the whole world. The queen embraced a man from another world who had come into her life on the cold marble within a circle of runes. And behind her stood 5 women. Kate, with a rifle on her back and a quiet smile on her lips. Song, in an ink-stained apron, with teary eyes. Hilda, with calloused hands crossed over her chest. Madeline, with a cross around her neck and a medical bag slung over her shoulder. Una, small, quiet, with a walkie-talkie in her hand. And every one of them knew. The war was over, but the work was just beginning. A month later, Arthur stood in a liberated village in the north. Next to him was a boy of about 8. He was trying to draw a homemade bow. He couldn't. His hands were weak. The bowstring was tight. Arthur sat down beside him. He took an air rifle out of his gear, a simple one, lightweight, 4.5mm caliber, made specifically for this moment. He showed him how to hold it, how to breathe, how to pull the trigger. The boy took aim. He fired. He hit the target on the first try. His eyes lit up. Arthur put his hand on the boy's shoulder. He said quietly, "Remember, strength isn't what you hold in your hands. Strength is what you've decided to protect." 6 people were standing around the corner of the house. Kate heard and understood that strength is a choice, not an order. Song heard and understood that strength is knowledge that is shared, not hidden. Hilda heard and understood that strength is something you make with your own hands for another. Madeline heard and understood that strength is a life you saved. Una heard and understood that strength is a voice heard by those left alone. Leah heard and understood that power is a responsibility one does not run from. The world was entering a new era, without demons, without the rift, without heroes, with guns in the hands of farmers, with walkie-talkies in every village, with armies that did not fall apart with the death of a single person, with factories and academies and hospitals, with ordinary people who would never again be helpless in the face of darkness. Arthur stood next to the boy and looked up at the clear sky. He had come into this world as an engineer. He would remain in it as a human being. And that was enough.